Chapter 8:11. Wu Ming stretched out his hand, his eyes turning golden as he began chanting. I will deny the sky, deny the earth. The storm will destroy everything, and the rain will cover everything. With this supreme divine power, I will make everything in heaven and earth bow and kneel. Instantly, the sky darkened as dark clouds gathered. The cold wind was biting cold. It seemed slow, but it quickly condensed into a tornado that descended from the sky. The sharp-eyed white Wuxia could tell at a glance that the ability Wu Ming used came from God. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The storm landed in the middle of the twin-headed dragons. Many twin-headed dragons were swept up and flew into the tornado. In the blink of an eye, they were crushed. They couldn't even scream. The fresh blood produced by the crushed twin-headed dragons turned into new twin-headed dragons. But these new twin-headed dragons were instantly crushed again. Then new twin-headed dragons were born and crushed again, until they couldn't split anymore. However, because he had to be wary of his surroundings, Wu Ming didn't use much strength in the tornado he controlled. The tornado was small and its suction was weak. It only sucked in the twin-headed dragons in the middle. As expected, I can't let go at all here. White Wuxia naturally understood Wu Ming's concerns. If she were to do it, she might not be as good as Wu Ming. Don't you have that inherent barrier? Can't you transfer them all over at once? White Wuxia still remembered that at the end of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, it was Wu who transferred a large group of twin-headed dragons into the inherent barrier. In the end, White Wuxia used sun sovereignty to finish off those twin-headed dragons in one go. There's no need to go through so much trouble. As Wu Ming spoke, his golden eyes were still open as he stretched out his other hand. God says humans are sinful. God says humans need to be purified. Thus, I will send the monstrous flood to my body. In the name of the Supreme King, I will bestow the world with equal liberation. After another chant, a stream of water came out of nowhere and floated around the two-headed dragons, forming a thick circular wall of water. The two-headed dragons were at a loss, and they were tightly encircled. It's not over yet, Wu Ming shouted, and the hand he stretched out behind him instantly clenched into a fist. Instantly, the ring-shaped water flow seemed to shrink, pushing the two-headed dragons towards the center. The two-headed dragons began to attack the water wall in an attempt to rush out, but the moment they came into contact with the water wall, they were sucked in. As if the internal and external pressure were different, the two-headed dragon that was sucked into the water wall was also torn apart, and the two-headed dragon was forced to retreat towards the center. However, the center wasn't a good place either. Unknowingly, the tornado had suddenly become stronger. Together with the circular wall of water, the two-headed dragon that was gradually approaching the center was completely engulfed by the tornado. Wu Ming placed his palms together, and the circular wall of water attached itself to the tornado. It was as if the tornado had put on a layer of water. Finally, he clasped his hands together. The water merged into the tornado, forming a magnificent waterspout. In the waterspout, the twin-headed dragons were torn apart again and again, and the new twin-headed dragons produced by the blood were the same. It was like a meat grinder. Slowly, the last twin-headed dragon whose blood couldn't split was torn apart, and at that moment, the blue waterspout turned red. In the end, the twin-headed dragon's blood couldn't continue to split into new twin-headed dragons, and the blood dyed the waterspout a bright red color. Thou hast violated the contract and brought evil to the world. Lord's Day, sinners shall be punished. Shatter their backs, dig out their tendons, bones, hair, and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot approach the darkness, I will follow the Lord's words and destroy thee. Another chant was uttered, and a black sphere appeared in Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming gently tossed it, and the black sphere flew towards the waterspout. The waterspout that was still spinning continuously sucked the black sphere formed by the annihilation incarnation into it. The moment the black sphere was sucked in, it began to emit a black light, like a black hole, or rather, a black hole. Suddenly, the entire waterspout was sucked in by the light emitted by the black sphere, as if it had really entered a black hole. In just a few seconds, the blood-colored waterspout disappeared, completely annihilated. Finally, Wu Ming snapped his fingers, and the black sphere floating in the sky was completely shattered with a bang. Bits of black magic power crystals scattered in the sky until they disappeared. The crisis that threatened No Name, and even the East Burrow, was resolved. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. After that, seeing that the crisis was resolved, White Wuxia didn't compliment Wu Ming and quickly left. I'm going to contact the rulers of the other regions and have a good discussion about this incident. It seemed that the threat to the East Burrow this time made White Wuxia unable to sit still. She was worried that it would affect the entire box court. Wu Ming, on the other hand, said that he had to return to No Name to check on the children's situation. As expected of Master, you easily destroyed the avatar of absolute evil. Letitia was the first to welcome him. In the face of Letitia's compliment, Wu Ming didn't mind. Are the children all right? From the traces on No Name's land, it could be seen that the children were renovating the land at that time. Perhaps they were preparing for the crops that 16th night, and the others brought back. They're fine. Lily and I have been comforting the children. Even though the crisis was resolved, Letitia didn't let the children out. Instead, she continued to stay in the house and rest for a while. They've all grown up and didn't panic. They're sensible and obedient. Letitia revealed a motherly expression. Your motherly expression really shouldn't appear on your lowly face. Wu Ming pulled Letitia's little face, causing Letitia to look at Wu Ming in dissatisfaction. Even if it's Master, if you play with me wantonly, I'll still be angry. However, when Wu Ming stopped pulling and changed to touching her cheek, Letitia still rubbed against him in enjoyment. At the very least, you have to ask for my permission. This made Wu Ming not know whether to laugh or cry. What's with your arrogant tone? And don't forget, Letitia belongs to me. She has no human rights. The phrase "no human rights" was something that Letitia had said to Pest not long ago. In the end, Wu Ming used it to describe Letitia. Master, you're so annoying. Letitia curled her lips expressionlessly. However, in Wu Ming's eyes it was quite cute. Anyway, she didn't realize it. After playing with Letitia for a while, Wu Ming became serious. Get ready, Letitia. Facing Letitia's doubtful gaze, Wu Ming explained. This attack isn't targeted at No Name, but the entire East District. No Name is just incidental. Wu Ming turned to look at the horizon. I'm safe here, but what if the same thing happens to other districts? Letitia's eyes suddenly shrank. Master, you mean this is an attack targeting the entire district? Chapter 8:12. Wu Ming didn't care about Letitia's shock. It does seem that way. But Wu Ming's answer made Letitia, who wasn't stupid, realize that there was more to it than meets the eye. Master, you mean, these attacks are only on the surface? Letitia's expression became serious. If the attacks that affected the entire box were only on the surface, then what was hidden underneath the surface? How shocking would it be? At least that's what I think. Then Wu Ming looked at the magic puppet that was still standing in the distance. I'm going to fix No Name's defense. Letitia, go rest for a while. Later, come with me to find White Wuxia. Uncovering this layer of mystery was important, but the safety of No Name was more important. Yes, Master. Letitia nodded. But then, Letitia was stunned. What about Pest? As she spoke, Letitia took out Pest's summoning ring that Wu Ming gave her. I almost forgot. Lightly touching his chin, Wu Ming thought about how to deal with Pest. Wu Ming and Letitia didn't need Pest's power, but currently, the main members of No Name weren't here, and Wu Ming hadn't been to the southern district, so he couldn't find them in a short period of time. He had to immediately let Pest become a fighting force. How about letting Lily wear this ring? Wu Ming said tentatively as he and Letitia looked at each other. After a while, in No Name's meeting room, a scream suddenly came out. What? The scream, full of girlish energy, made the birds on the roof all fly away. No. No. Lily can't. The little fox girl Lily's face was red. She put her hands in front of her chest and couldn't help but step back. Slowly, Lily was forced into a corner. Then Lily's body leaned against the wall and slid to the ground. No is no but. Wu Ming calmly took a sip of the tea that Letitia made, and looked at Lily, who was hiding in the corner. Why do you have to look like you've met a bad person? Letitia, who was standing behind Wu Ming, helped Wu Ming complain. After Wu Ming suggested that Lily use the summoning ring, Lily showed such a state. In short, Lily can't. Lily, who was sitting on the ground, kept shaking her head. Master Villo and Lady Letitia are both here. Why do you want Lily to use the summoning ring? Lily's face was a bit unnatural. It wasn't that she hated the devil, but Lily felt that she would waste of this power. Since Lily doesn't agree, then let's change our method. Letitia was still very soft-hearted towards the children of no name. After all, Lily was still a child. If possible, Letitia really didn't want a child like Ren to stand out. Actually, this is what I'm thinking. Lily has been staying in no name all this time. For now, letting her use Pest's ring is the best solution. Wu Ming finished the tea in his cup and put it down. But since Lily is unwilling, I'll change my plan. Wu Ming's words made Lily sigh in relief. Although she felt that she couldn't bear the devil's power and would waste this power, if there was really no other way, Lily was willing to accept and work hard to motivate herself. But since there was another way, it was the best. Master, do you have any other ideas? Letitia felt that her master was omnipotent. I know of a ritual that can use a holy relic to summon the clone of a deceased person called a heroic spirit. Holy relic? Heroic spirit? Heroic spirit? Clone? Letitia and Lily were confused. The box court world didn't seem to have the concept of holy relic and heroic spirit. Simply put, it's using an antique to summon a spirit. By the way, I can be considered as a summoned spirit right now. Is that Lord Villo dead? Lily's face instantly became sad. But Wu Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry and shook his head. I'm here to find my body. I'm not dead. Calm down, Lily. Right. Lily's cheeks became red again because of embarrassment. Because Wu Ming was too much like a normal person, Lily forgot that Wu Ming was actually a spirit. Behind Wu Ming, Letitia's cheeks also became red. She also subconsciously ignored her master's identity. In short, if you use the ring that summons Pest as a holy relic, the success rate of summoning Pest is not 100%, but at least 99%. After all, that ring was used to summon Pest. There was no reason for the summoning to fail. Then, Wu Ming took out the ring to summon Pest. Moreover, Pest summoned as a heroic spirit might be able to increase his strength. And this would solve the problem of Pest's strength. Of course, the specifics would only be known after the summoning. Wu Ming started drawing a magic circle in the meeting room. The materials used were naturally from No Name's warehouse. Although No Name wasn't particularly rich now, it was still considered to be in the middle class. He melted the gemstones with special magic to obtain the gemstone solution. Then he added it into the blood of the griffin to draw the magic circle. There were no fancy operations. It was just a simple drawing of the magic circle. Then, Wu Ming placed the ring used to summon Pest in the palm of his hand, and began to chant the summoning oath. Declare. In an instant, Wu Ming, who was standing in front of the magic circle, poured his magic into the magic circle. The whole room darkened. Letitia and Lily, who were watching from the side, revealed solemn expressions. Thou shalt hear my command. Thy sword is with me. Answer my summons immediately. Just like the magic circle, Wu Ming's oath to summon Pest was also simple. Instantly, the magic circle and the ring on Wu Ming's hand lit up at the same time. Then Wu Ming increased the amount of magic he poured into the magic circle. Gradually, the magic circle and the ring became brighter and brighter. Lily, who was the weakest in the room, couldn't help but cover her eyes. When the light reached its peak, the whole room seemed to have come to a standstill. Then, as if something had leaked, a sound was heard. Puff! The whole room was filled with smoke. Letitia hurriedly shielded Lily, afraid that she would be hurt. However, the smoke was actually the magic gas from the griffin's blood that had been added with gemstone solution. At this moment, the magic circle that was covered by the smoke stopped shining. The same went for the ring on Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming waved his hand, and the magic gas was instantly blown away, revealing the magic circle and the petite figure standing in it. Wu Ming smiled at this. Success. Chapter 8:13. Standing in the middle of the magic circle that had dried up, Pest slowly opened his dark red eyes that symbolized the Black Death. Avenger, Pest, at your command, my master. Pest looked expressionlessly at Wu Ming, who was standing in front of him, as if he was speaking subconsciously. The reason why it was subconscious was because Pest was obviously stunned when he said those words. The expression on his face was as if he was saying, "What am I talking about?" Sure enough, it worked. The magic circle that summoned Pest was modified by Wu Ming, and it was the same magic circle that Wu Ming used when he returned. Although Wu Ming had no problem using it on himself, Wu Ming was worried that something might go wrong if he used it on Pest. Moreover, because the summoning circle was modified by Wu Ming according to the box court world, Wu Ming and Pest's state were more like heroic spirits than servants. In fact, there was not much difference. After all, Pest was not a living person, but a ghost. And Pest, who was summoned through a special method, was still not a living person, but still a ghost. However, because of the summoning ritual, Pest's various abilities were greatly improved. Your current state is actually 4 digits. Wu Ming was shocked when he felt Pest's aura. 4 digits. Lily, who heard Wu Ming's words, was shocked. After all, 4 digits was already the highest level in the box court world. Because it was an unorthodox summoning ritual in the box court world, Wu Ming as the master could not check Pest's attributes as a master. However, it was still possible for Wu Ming to check the number of people without any concealment through their aura. Master, didn't you say that Pest's strength might increase because of the ceremony? Letitia could also sense Pest's level. She was also a 4-digit number, so she could also sense Pest's level. Although that's true, this increase is too exaggerated. Wu Ming was quite puzzled. From 5 digits to 6 digits, it rose all the way to 4 digits. Although a 4-digit number was at the bottom, Pastor was indeed a 4-digit number. The phoenix tail was much more powerful than the chicken head because this was a qualitative change. I think it might be because of Master that my strength increased so much. Pest looked at Wu Ming with a hint of fear in his eyes. A servant's attributes were affected by their master. The stronger the master, the stronger the servant's attributes would be. Pest was indeed summoned as a servant, but it was not because of the extra power that Pest gained from being a servant, but because Wu Ming had established a master-servant relationship with Pest. Although Wu Ming might not be aware of this, Pest had a very deep impact on him. Originally, Wordless had only given Pest the impression that he was an expert who could defeat him. Now, Wordless gave Pest the impression that he was a god. Pest looked at the scene before him. A dragon was crawling in the universe filled with dense qi. Every breath he took gave Pest immense pressure. Gradually, the dragon's breathing stabilized and his eyelids twitched. Slowly, the dragon's eyes opened a sliver. Just the twitching of its eyelids made Pest feel fear. The opening of its eyes greatly affected Pest's mind. It was as if his brain had been stirred into a mess. Pester suspected that if he waited for the dragon to fully awaken and look at him with its huge dragon eyes, he might lose his mind. Fortunately, the moment the dragon fully opened its eyes, Pest was summoned and stood in the center of the magic formation. The moment Pest was summoned, he learned some information about Wu Ming through the contract he had with Wu Ming. But because of this, Pest was so obedient and looked at Wu Ming with eyes full of fear. However, Wu Ming did not notice Pest's fear of him. He was interested in what Pest said. You know that the master's strength can affect the servant's strength? Is this knowledge from the summoning ritual? The only reason Pest knew that the strength of the master could affect the strength of the servant was because of the Holy Grail's knowledge. However, there was no Holy Grail in this world. How could such knowledge be imparted to Pest? Pest, how do you know this? I learned it from you, master. Pest answered honestly. The moment she formed the contract with Wu Ming, not only did Pest see the universe Wu Ming brought to her, but she also learned some knowledge about the Holy Grail War from Wu Ming. Memory sharing? But this kind of situation will only happen when you're asleep. It was common knowledge that the master would dream of the servant's past. If the servant was asleep, the servant would also dream of the master's past. This was a result of the contract, and it was mutual. When Pest is not summoned, she should be asleep, Letitia suddenly said. But facing Letitia's question, Pest was very reluctant, but in the end, she nodded honestly. After Pest was killed, she was indeed in a state of hibernation. That's not right. I only know the knowledge. It's impossible for me to only know the knowledge in my dreams. There must be something else. Wu-ming frowned and squinted at Pest. Pest, you should have something else you haven't said, right? In just an instant, Pest's face turned pale. She did not say a word, and even her body stiffened. Wu-ming's words reminded her of the dragon she saw before. The way Wu-ming squinted his eyes was very similar to the dragon. Pest was once again sure that Wu-ming was the mysterious dragon. Master, Pest seems to be frightened by you. Letitia poked Wu-ming's back. That seems to be the case. Wu-ming naturally saw Pest's pale face and stiff body. Is it because I look so scary? He could not help but touch his face. No matter how he touched it, it was still a handsome face. How could he scare Pest? Forget it. We'll talk about it when you feel like it. Wu-ming shrugged. Although he did not know the reason, it was not a bad thing for the current situation. That's it for now. Pest, stay in no name and get used to your power. But remember, do not attack your companions. I got it. Pest nodded. His stiff body and pale face were no longer as pale as before. Even if she had 10 times the courage, she would not dare to do anything. After all, Wu-ming's influence on her was too deep. Chapter 8:14. After settling Pest down, Wu-ming checked No Name's magic puppet. After confirming that there were no mistakes, Wu-ming left some rune magic on the ground around No Name. Originally, Wu-ming wanted to set up some magic traps directly, but Wu-ming would feel bad if unrelated people fell for them. Therefore, Wu-ming changed it to detection magic. If he sensed any strange people or things, Wu-ming would immediately use the portal to return. Of course, Wu-ming felt that there shouldn't be any more enemies in the near future. After all, the enemy's goal wasn't No Name, but something else. However, to be cautious, Wu-ming still did so. After checking again that there were no mistakes, Wu-ming opened the portal and returned to No Name's meeting room. Pest returned to her assigned room alone. Before familiarizing herself with her body's strength, she needed to recover her spirit. After all, the giant dragon in her dream had affected her too much. On the other hand, Lily and the other children of No Name began to work again. After all, the children of No Name had all suffered before, and this made them even more restless. However, because of Wu-ming's instructions, they didn't go outside. Instead, they worked in the room, such as cleaning. Only Letitia was waiting for Wu-ming in the meeting room. Master, are the preparations complete? Letitia, who was sitting on the sofa and waiting for Wu-ming, immediately got up when she saw Wu-ming arrive. Okay, let's go. Letitia, let's go find White Wuxia. Yes, Master. 210-5380 Outer Gate, inside the Thousand Yes branch. White Wuxia sat there with a distressed look on his face. His arms were crossed in front of his chest as if he was waiting for someone. Black and purple ripples appeared out of thin air, and Wu-ming walked out with Letitia. You're finally here. Seeing the person he was looking forward to, White Wuxia's restless face relaxed a little. Look at you. Did you get some bad news? It was still the same cushion as before. Wu-ming directly pulled it over and unceremoniously sat in front of White Wuxia. I just received news that the West, North, and South districts were also attacked by Absolute Evil's avatar. What? Letitia, who was sitting beside Wu-ming, was shocked. Her master was right. This is bad news. However, from the looks of it, the two-headed dragon army in the other districts should have been dealt with. Wu-ming wasn't surprised at all. He was rather calm. It's all been dealt with. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here waiting for you. Although White Wuxia was the ruler of the East District, she would take action if there was a disaster that affected the entire Hakata. Of course, it was the same for the other guardians. Then the situation in the other districts and Eyes and Eyes. Be in the eyes, Letitia said Letitia's in eyes. According to Wu-ming's understanding, the class ruler of the West seemed to be a cadre of Thousand Eyes, but Wu-ming didn't know the details. Noticing the confusion on Wu-ming's face, Letitia explained for Wu-ming. Master, the class ruler of the West that Lady White Wuxia mentioned is called Demon Laplace. He's one of the cadre of Thousand Eyes. Due to his ability, he has been in a deep slumber. White Wuxia spoke as well. Letitia's ability is actually referring to his powerful prophetic ability. Could it be the cadre of Thousand Eyes who predicted that a demon king would attack Fire Dragon's birth ritual? Wuming suddenly thought. Being a cadre of Thousand Eyes and having prophetic abilities made it easy for people to associate him with the cadre of Thousand Eyes who had given a 100% accurate prophecy. That's right. The prophecy of Fire Dragon's birth ritual was given by him. However, that fellow is in a deep slumber all year round, so there's no need to pay attention to him. In short, nothing major happened in the West because of his unexpected awakening. White Yiksha didn't plan on explaining Demon Laplace to Wuming. However, although he had coincidentally woken up, he wasn't weak to be able to deal with Absolute Evil's clone. That Demon Laplace was at least in the 4 digits. Wuming thought so. As for the South District's Absolute Evil clone, it was 16th Knights and Company who helped deal with it. They also gained a wave of no-names reputation. I have to say that they did well. 16th Knights and Company, who were participating in the Dragon Horn Griffin Lions Harvest Festival in the South District, happened to encounter this matter. However, they almost destroyed the Harvest Festival and they didn't realize it at all. However, White Yiksha looked like he was gloating. As expected of problematic children, Black Rabbit will probably cry for a while. Wuming smiled helplessly. After all, they were problematic children. Benevolence and Black Rabbit had it quite hard. The situation in the North District isn't very good. It's different from the West and East Districts, which are basically undamaged. It's also different from the South District, which has few casualties. The North District can be said to be the worst area. The streets and houses are damaged, and there are many casualties. White Yiksha's expression became melancholic. It's because of Shadora and Company. Wuming understood very well why. Shadora was one of the rulers of the North District's hierarchy. This meant that there were others who shared the position of ruler. Why was that? Naturally, it was because no one in the community in the North District had the ability to be the sole ruler of the hierarchy. Therefore, there were many rulers of the hierarchy who managed the North District together. Wuming did not know much about the rulers of the other classes, but Wuming knew about Shadora. Shadora's individual strength was not enough to fight against the two-headed dragon army. As for Salamandra, a community that relied on group battles, they were also unable to fight against the two-headed dragon army that was also good at group battles. Not to mention, Absolute Evil's doppelganger had the strength of a deity, which was only in the 5 digits. It was probably the same for the other communities of rulers of the other classes. Therefore, when the two-headed dragons attacked the North District, they were unable to eliminate all of the two-headed dragons in an instant. As a result, the two-headed dragons rushed into the city and caused destruction, causing casualties. Lord White Yiksha, I remember that there's that existence in the North District, right? Letitia suddenly asked. That existence? Who's that? Wuming was puzzled. After all, in terms of being familiar with the world of the box, Wuming was a complete novice compared to Letitia. You're talking about that great devil, right? White Yiksha shook a fan that he had taken out of nowhere. Closing the fan instantly, White Yiksha said the other party's name. A great devil born at the boundary between life and death, the leader of the community Willow's Wisp. He's known as the strongest devil in the North District, Vera za Ignifatus. Chapter 8:15. So it's the leader of Willow's Wisp. Wuming came to a realization. In the competition called Gift of the Creator at the Fire Dragon's Birth Festival, Kasuga Hikari's opponent in the finals was a ghost named Aisha Ignifast, and her companion, Jack the Pumpkin Monster, who came from the community of Willow's Wisp. If that person took action, the army of Absolute Evil's clones should be easily dealt with. It seemed that Letitia acknowledged the other party's strength. It was Vera who took action. The North District was only slightly slower than the other districts in dealing with the Absolute Evil's clones. If Vera did not take action, White Yiksha would have to go to the North District to provide support. Speaking of which, since this devil is so powerful, why isn't she a class controller? Wuming's words were not without reason. Since there was a powerhouse who could deal with the Absolute Evil's clones so cleanly, why was this powerhouse not a class controller? This can be considered Vera's personal reasons, White Yixiao explained vaguely. Personal reasons? Wu Ming was stunned. In short, if you can see her, you'll know. White Yixiao waved his hand embarrassedly. Immediately after, White Yixiao frowned as if he had encountered something puzzling. But now that you've asked, I'm a little concerned about Vera. She should have been in the North District all along. Why didn't she appear in time to deal with the two-headed dragon army? Could it be that she was delayed by something else? Letitia guessed. That shouldn't be the case. Although she has quite a personality, even if there was something else, she should have put down the matter at hand and dealt with the two-headed dragon's invasion crisis. However, Wu Ming thought of something. The reason she was delayed, could it be that she fought with the enemy who transferred the two-headed dragon army? After all, the invasion of the absolute evil clones that attacked the entire Hakata was man-made. Wu Ming and the others did not encounter the enemy, but it did not mean that the people in the other districts did not encounter them. Then, Wu Ming's guess was not without reason. That's possible. White Yixiao's expression was solemn as he nodded. However, because White Yixiao was only collecting information unilaterally and had not seen the person involved, he could not make a judgment. Without further ado, Wu Ming and White Yixiao began to discuss serious matters. I say, White Yixiao, don't you think the attack this time is very strange? Tell me what you think. White Yixiao was naturally a smart person. If Wu Ming could see that there was a problem, so could White Yixiao. Absolute Evil's doppelganger may seem powerful, but every region has the ability to deal with it. I think the other party definitely understands this. So why are they still doing this? Although the griffin named Glea Grove and the black-cloaked girl were easily taken down by Wu Ming didn't think that the other party was a weakling. The black-cloaked girl had the grace of distance control. It didn't seem like much, but it was actually a very rare grace. As for that griffin, although it didn't have any special abilities, it was possible that it hadn't exposed itself yet. Furthermore, the other party's strength was extraordinary. Although it was easily suppressed by Wu Ming, it was only because Wu Ming had used giant transformation. Apart from 16th Night, Wu Ming couldn't guarantee that anyone could wrestle with the griffin. There was also that fellow named Maxwell. Wu Ming had never understood his ability. On the surface, it looked like a simple teleportation, but Wu Ming's sixth sense told him that it wasn't that simple. Moreover, Maxwell had an inexplicable resurrection ability. Just this alone made Wu Ming unable to do anything to him for the time being. It could also be a doppelganger or an illusion. In short, Maxwell was very difficult to deal with. Finally, the other party's master, the so-called Highness whose background was unknown, and Wu Ming couldn't be sure if there were others. In short, this faction wasn't simple to Wu Ming. I feel that this attack is just a pretense. It's a cover for the other party's next plan. Oh, did you discover anything? White Yixiao opened his fan with a whoosh. No, Wu Ming answered rather calmly. If you didn't, then what are you talking about? White Yixiao was quite angry. She thought that Wu Ming had discovered some clues. Although I didn't discover anything, we can analyze it. Wu Ming smiled slightly. In this double-headed dragon's attack, which district suffered the most serious damage? The North and South districts. Letitia immediately answered, giving Wu Ming face. Although the damage in the South district was mainly caused by 16th Night and the others. That's right. The West and East districts didn't suffer much damage. Therefore, the other party's next plan might be carried out in these two damaged districts. After all, the more chaotic it was, the easier it was to stir up trouble. This was the principle of fishing in troubled waters. White Yixiao gently waved his fan and nodded slightly. It does make sense. Seeing White Yixiao nod, Wu Ming continued. This double-headed dragon and the final double-headed dragon in the fire dragon's birth ceremony in the North District must be done by the same person, or rather, by the same faction. Then Wu Ming changed the topic. And if you say that Pest has nothing to do with the other party, I don't really believe it. Letitia and White Yixiao were stunned and then fell into deep thought. Indeed, if Pest had nothing to do with the double-headed dragon that appeared in the end, no one would believe it. If Pest is the other party's person, and if we had lost the competition, then as the leader, White Yixiao, wouldn't he have fallen completely into the other party's hands? As soon as Wu Ming said this, both Letitia and White Yiksha felt a chill down their spines. Yes, if they had lost the competition, White Yiksha would have become Pest's possession. And if Pest was the person who created the double-headed dragon, then White Yiksha would have fallen into the other party's hands. Both Letitia and White Yiksha knew White Yiksha's power very well. If he was used by someone, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although there was a reason for his defeat, White Yiksha knew that he was too powerful, so he chose to submit to the Buddhists in the end. He obtained Yiksha's godhood and belittled himself. Under the premise that this hypothesis is true, let's change our focus. Wu Ming once again raised a new point of focus. The other party once wanted to purchase Letitia. Letitia and White Yiksha broke out in cold sweat again. You mean that the other party is collecting powerhouses? White Yiksha frowned. Luce once said that the person who wanted to purchase Letitia from Perseus was someone outside the box court. And when I went to meet those people, I was attacked by the double-headed dragon. Since you can't find any information about the enemy who lured the double-headed dragon here at the fire dragon's birth ceremony, this matches up. White Yiksha was enlightened. I see. Because the other party is someone outside the box court, it makes sense that we can't find any information. Immediately after, White Yiksha thought of some information that he needed to inform Wu Ming. Actually, the hierarchy in the South District has changed. Chapter 8:16. The Southern District's hierarchy has changed? Wu Ming was taken aback. That's right, and it happened not long ago. White Yiksha nodded. Not long ago, the community of the former Southern District's hierarchy, Avalon, was attacked. If it wasn't for the Northern District's Willow's Wisp, who happened to be nearby and intervened through unconventional means, I'm afraid Avalon would have been completely wiped out. White Yiksha explained with a serious expression. Wu Ming felt a little unnatural. After all, Avalon was obviously King Arthur's scabbard, Avalon. Since that was the case, the other party was likely related to the Knights of the Round Table. He didn't know if there was a Villa the Ransword in this world. It shouldn't be. After all, White Yiksha and the others didn't have any reaction to his name, as if it was the first time they heard it. Unaware of Wu Ming's random thoughts, White Yiksha continued speaking. However, even so, Avalon suffered a devastating blow. The original hierarchy's leader was removed from his position, and the Community Alliance's Dragon Horn Griffin Lion was prepared to take over as the hierarchy's leader. Although he hadn't officially taken over, the other party had already been recognized by the Southern District. Therefore, for now, it didn't matter if it was official or not. At this moment, Letitia raised her hand. Lord White Yiksha, do you know who the enemy that attacked Avalon was? White Yiksha shook his head helplessly. Unfortunately, although Willow's Wisp forcefully intervened, Avalon did indeed lose to the other party. Although there wasn't much of a loss, the price of Avalon's defeat was that we couldn't reveal the other party's information. Therefore, I don't know who the enemy is. In Suitland, the rules of Suitland were absolute. Therefore, Avalon couldn't reveal the specific situation. However, one thing is clear. The other party is the Demon King. As for why, it was because the black contract documents rained down from the sky at that time. Many people saw it, and everyone in Suitland knew what the black contract documents represented. Therefore, he was most certain that the other party was the Demon King. It can be said that if it wasn't for the intervention of Willow's Wisp, the entire community of Avalon would have been wiped out. However, if it was really as Villo speculated, Avalon would very likely become the possession of the Demon King. Immediately after, Bayasha's eyes narrowed. I suspect that the Demon King who attacked Avalon is from the same faction as Pest and the person who can control the two-headed dragon. Wu Ming crossed his arms and nodded. First, they attacked the Southern District. Then they attacked the Fire Dragon birth ceremony that was jointly held by the Eastern and Northern Districts. Finally, they attacked the entire box. It seems that the other party is not weak. Although the results showed that the other party had never succeeded, the fact that the other party could continue to cause trouble despite repeated failures was enough to prove that the other party had a deep foundation. Do we need to find Pest for information? Letitia suddenly asked. After all, Pest might know those people. When you see her again, give her a gentle hint. If she really doesn't want to say it, then forget it. I don't really want to treat Pest as an item. Since she joined No Name, she's a family. Wu-Ming did not want to treat Pest as a slave. Wu-Ming believed that the other members of No Name would not want to do that either. I understand, Master. Letitia nodded and did not say anything else. However, her gaze toward Wu-Ming became gentler. If Pest hears your words, I'm afraid Pest will have a better impression of you. Bayasha also turned serious and revealed a frivolous expression again. By the way, Bayasha, how do you know that Pest doesn't have a good impression of me? Wu-Ming frowned. Although Pest was indeed very angry with Wu-Ming based on his behavior before Wu-Ming stabbed him, Bayasha was not present at that time. However, Bayasha's current appearance gave people the feeling that he had a lot of interaction with Pest. Roar. Of course, that's because I used that ring before you came to retrieve it. Pest and I have already talked. Bayasha did not hide anything and told Wu-Ming and Letitia the truth. I see. If it's you, you do need to talk to Pest. Letitia nodded in understanding. No one would believe that the incarnation of the Sun and the incarnation of the Black Death did not need to talk to each other. Moreover, Bayasha was in the wrong. After all, it was the Sun's laziness that caused the Black Death to break out. Although Bayasha's words were reasonable, Wu-Ming did not believe them. Wu-Ming and Bayasha did not have much interaction. However, Bayasha was the only problem child. Wu-Ming knew this in his heart. In other words, you didn't do anything strange to Pest, did you, Bayasha? Wu-Ming looked at Bayasha suspiciously. Wu-Ming still remembered that when Pest was summoned, he was silent, or rather, very obedient. Moreover, after standing for a while, Pest's face turned pale and his body stiffened. It looked like his spirit had suffered a severe blow. Now that he thought about it, could it be that Bayasha did something to Pest? What are you talking about? Pest and I just had a good conversation in various aspects. Yes. With a calm expression, White Yiksha indicated that there was only a simple exchange between him and Pest. Then why does Pest look like he's in shock? You really didn't do it? Wu-Ming became more and more suspicious. He knew how powerful a problem child like Bayasha was. Even if she really did it, with Bayasha's thick skin, he would probably not admit it. Is that so? Maybe it's not easy to accept the new environment. However, Bayasha's heart had already begun to change. It was rare that forcing someone to change clothes would leave a deep psychological trauma. But Pest clearly scolded him very happily back then, right? However, just as Bayasha was feeling conflicted, Wu-Ming gave up on asking. I'll believe you for now. Then Wu-Ming made a request. Bayasha, I hope you can go to the South District and help me tell 16th Night, and the others not to come back for the time being. Continue to stay there. It was not that Wu-Ming did not trust the South District, but Wu-Ming trusted his own people more. 16th Night, and the others were already considered top-notch in the lower levels of the box court. Wu-Ming believed that even if the enemy wanted to do something bad in the South District, there would be no problem with 16th Night and the others around. More importantly, 16th Night and the others happened to be in the South District. Seeing that Wu-Ming had started to talk about serious matters, Bayasha also became serious. Do you want 16th Night and the others to help keep an eye on the South District? No problem, leave it to me. Bayasha turned his head and looked at Wu-Ming. Then, what do you plan to do? Wu-Ming silently looked north. If it's me, I'll go to the North District. Chapter 8:17. The Southern District is guarded by 16th Night and the others, while the Eastern District is guarded by you. So I've decided to check out the situation in the Northern District. Wu-Ming retracted his gaze from the north and looked at White Yiksha again. I should be relieved to leave the Eastern District to you, right, White Yiksha? Wu-Ming teased with a smile. Wu-Ming didn't look down on White Yiksha just because he couldn't do anything against the twin-headed dragon army. The star spirit of the sun, the devil king of the White Knight, White Yiksha's ability was beyond Wu-Ming's imagination. If White Yiksha recovered his two-digit main body, he would definitely be able to capture the absolute evil doppelganger easily. Back then, he could not do anything about the absolute evil doppelganger because the absolute evil doppelganger came menacingly, and there were too many of them. White Wuxia had 14 sun sovereigns. Just by using sun sovereigns, he could easily eliminate these absolute evil doppelganger. However, if he really used it, the surroundings would probably be in a mess. Because he had too many concerns, White Wuxia was helpless. Facing Wu Ming's teasing, White Wuxia was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he closed his eyes, opened them, and smiled. Who do you think I am? I'm the ruler of the Eastern District. I bet my name as the star spirit of the Sun and White Knight. Leave the Eastern District to me. At this moment, White Wuxia's powerful demeanor was revealed. I'll leave no name to you for the time being, Lord White Wuxia. Letitia was also in awe. With that, Wu Ming, Letitia, and White Wuxia's conversation ended. After learning from White Wuxia which part of the Northern District suffered the most damage, Wu Ming and Letitia left. Northern District, between the 399, 9999 and 4 million outer gates. At a bell tower, a black and purple teleportation door appeared out of thin air. Wu Ming and Letitia walked out. This seems to be the bell tower that 16th Knight and Black Rabbit destroyed, Master. Letitia recognized the familiar place at a glance. In the end, it was Wu Ming who helped to repair it. That's right. It's indeed here. After all, didn't White Wuxia say that it's not intentional or unintentional? The outer gate that held the fire dragon's birth ceremony suffered the most damage? Therefore, Wu Ming brought Letitia here. Although we can also go to Salamandra's branch here, after thinking about it, I think it's better to stay here. Although Wu Ming and Salamandra had some conflicts before, after Shadora and Ren re-established an alliance between Salamandra and No Name, the two sides could be considered to have buried the hatchet. However, White Wuxia's and Letitia's and White Wuxia's and White Wuxia's had a White Wuxia. Moreover, this bell tower was located at a commanding height and was very hidden. As for why such a place was needed, it was because it could easily take in the surrounding situation. As I expected, the damage to the Northern District is much more serious than what White Wuxia said. They walked to the window of the bell tower and looked around. White Wuxia might have said that the Northern District was only slightly slower than the other districts in dealing with absolute evil's doppelganger, but sometimes, being slightly slower would delay things, such as the current Northern District. Because the bell tower's geographical location was closer to the center, and because there was no human habitation, it did not suffer fatal damage from absolute evil's doppelganger's attack. It only suffered some damage at the base. Moreover, the other outer gates were not so lucky. Wu Ming looked around. 7 or 8 of the 10 buildings were completely destroyed. The remaining 2 or 3 were so damaged that they were uninhabitable. Not only that, but Wu Ming also saw many bloodstains on the streets. These should be the residents' blood. After all, the blood of the two-headed dragon could split again, and it could be the blood of the two-headed dragon that could not split again. However, compared to this, Wu Ming felt that the two-headed dragon had been killed by people using special methods. He could not see any civilians. They might have been transferred to other outer gates to take refuge. Perhaps it was because the battle had just ended, but the people walking on the streets were basically all fully armed members of the Northern District community. This was because everyone had their own community's coat of arms. Wu Ming even saw people from Salamandra. Some of them were patrolling to see if there were any other survivors, while others were specifically searching for any two-headed dragons that had been left behind. The possibility of the former was not small. After all, the collapse of the building had knocked out the people who were still alive under it. Or the people hiding in the building did not have time to come out because of the collapse. The latter was unlikely. After all, although the two-headed dragons were said to be at the deity level, their strength was only at the deity level. Their intelligence was equivalent to that of an ordinary beast, or even lower. Generally speaking, unless they were all dead, they would not stop. However, there were exceptions. For example, when the two-headed dragon was eliminated, a two-headed dragon had accidentally been buried in the ruins of a building, and had just crawled out. Interestingly, Wu Ming, who was standing at a commanding height, happened to see such a scene. A white two-headed dragon struggled to crawl out of the thick ruins, and was ready to attack the patrolling personnel, who had just walked away. The patrolling personnel seemed to have heard a trace of a sound and immediately shouted, thinking that there were survivors. Hey, are there any survivors? If there are, please answer me. He was also one of the people who thought that it was unlikely for the two-headed dragon to survive. The man shouted as he explored the surrounding ruins. However, he did not know that the survivors he thought were actually the avatars of absolute evil that could take his life. Roar! The two-headed dragon roared and suddenly rushed toward the person who did not discover it. Wah! The person who heard the sound subconsciously turned his head, only to see the two-headed dragon pouncing towards him with its two bloody mouths wide open. He had no time to react. Hey! Suddenly, a girl's voice came from one side, and the two-headed dragon suddenly flew to the other side. Then a girl with blue and white pigtails appeared in front of the patrolling personnel, half squatting on the ground. This person was a member of Willow's Wisp, Aisha Ignufost. Thank you so much, Master Aisha. He had clearly seen what had happened just now. Aisha had kicked the two-headed dragon away. Otherwise, he might have died in the dragon's mouth. Haha. Aisha said with a trembling voice. You're not injured, right? The battle just ended not long ago. So it's inevitable that there will be remnants. You can't let your guard down. Aisha stood up and criticized the person. Yes. Master Aisha is right. I've learned my lesson. The person who was almost attacked was ashamed. He was indeed careless. If Aisha did not save the situation, he would have instantly died in the two-headed dragon's mouth. If he had been cautious from the beginning and noticed the existence of the two-headed dragon, he would have known that it was only a doppelganger of absolute evil. Even if he couldn't defeat it, he could have fought it for a few seconds and shouted for the surrounding people to come to his aid. In short, he would not be killed in an instant. But fortunately, Aisha was attracted by his shout, thinking that there was a survivor. In short, the result was good. Aisha, the enemy hasn't been defeated yet. You can't be careless. At this time, a big pumpkin head holding a lantern appeared from the side, and lectured Aisha in a strange tone. This big pumpkin was Aisha's companion, the pumpkin monster with a lantern Jack. Of course I know. Aisha's pale face was slightly red, which was particularly eye-catching. At this time, the two-headed dragon that was kicked down had already turned over, and was ready to attack again. It's just a 5-digit beast. Watch me take care of it in minutes. Aisha pouted and a blue flame appeared in her hand. Whoosh! But at this time, a white spear instantly pierced through the two-headed dragon's head and nailed it to the ground. Chapter 8:18. Who is it? Aisha immediately became alert and looked in the direction where the spear came from. That was the location of the clock tower. However, the other party appeared from behind Aisha. Long time no see, Aisha Jack. A dark purple portal appeared behind Jack, and Wuming and Letitia walked out. Oh, so it's Lord Villo and Lord Letitia. Long time no see. Jack immediately greeted Wuming. As a maid, Letitia was befitting of her identity. She slightly bent her back and nodded. Lord Villo and Lord Letitia, why are you in the northern district? When Aisha saw that it was Wuming and Letitia, she stopped throwing tantrums. Letitia was a senior in the box court, so Aisha naturally knew about her. The news of Wuming defeating the Demon King with a holy spear at the end of the fire dragon's birth ceremony also spread like wildfire. Although Wuming and Letitia were in the no-name community, Aisha would not look down on them because of this. The strong would be respected no matter where they went. So it's Lord Villo and Lord Letitia who defeated the Demon King. The person who was saved by Aisha also recognized Wuming and Letitia. After all, the fire dragon's birth ceremony had just ended. Taking advantage of the popularity, Wuming was quite famous in the northern district. Hurry up and go. Remember to be careful in the future. Not everyone will come to save you at all times. Seeing that Wuming and Letitia had arrived, Aisha hurriedly prepared to send away the person she saved. Yes, Lord Aisha. I won't disturb your conversation with Lord Jack and the other two. The person quickly got up, bowed to Aisha and Wuming, and then quickly left. He still had to continue patrolling and see if there were any survivors. I didn't know that you were quite famous. Wu-ming could see that the person who was saved respected Isha from the bottom of his heart, and not just because she saved his life. From this, it could be seen that Isha was quite famous in the northern district. After all, she was not weak. As the saying went, the strong would be respected wherever they went. During the Gift of the Creator finals, if it weren't for the fact that his relationship with Wu-ming had improved, and he had obtained Wu-ming's flame through becoming friends, he would have probably lost to Isha. Of course, I'm very famous in the northern district. However, as soon as Aisha Wu-ming praised her, she immediately raised her head proudly, her nose almost reaching the sky. By the way, you still haven't told me why you came to the northern district. Isha turned her head and thought for a moment. Naturally, it is because of these doppelgangers of absolute evil, Wu-ming said, extending his right hand. Yggdrasil, the holy spear that had pierced through the two-headed dragon's head and nailed to the ground, was pulled out of thin air and automatically flew into Wu-ming's hand. This should be the legendary holy spear that destroyed the Demon King with a single blow. It is indeed extraordinary. Although Jack was a creation created by the leader of the Willow's Wisp, he looked more like a powerful spirit that had lived for a long time. Jack could see the details of this pure white spear at a glance. The power it contained, coupled with the fact that it was held by Wu-ming, proved that this was the holy spear that had pierced through the Demon King. If you're referring to the spear that pierced through Pest, it is indeed this one. Wu-ming nodded calmly. Then, Wu-ming casually swung the holy spear, and golden ripples appeared at the tip of the spear, swallowing the holy spear. By the way, Lord Villo already knows that there are doppelgangers of absolute evil here. News travels so fast here. Isha was stunned. It seemed that she still did not know that the 4 districts had been invaded by doppelgangers of absolute evil. It is not only our northern district that has doppelgangers of absolute evil. Doppelgangers of absolute evil have also appeared in the eastern, southern and western districts. Isha. It seemed that Jack was in the know. Is it that serious? Isha was shocked. Regardless of how many doppelgangers of absolute evil were in the other districts, this had at least affected the entire district. Anyway, I'm here to investigate in the northern district. Wu-ming pointed at the two-headed dragon that had already turned into a dried corpse not far away. I didn't expect to encounter this as soon as I arrived, and even meet you guys. However, Isha looked in the direction Wu-ming pointed at, and was shocked by the dried corpse of the two-headed dragon. How did it dry up? Jack, on the other hand, saw some clues. It was roasted dry, right? Jack said as his gloved hand stroked the chin of his pumpkin head. Wu-ming nodded and began to explain. That's right. My holy spear is filled with the power of light. The moment it pierced its body, the powerful power of light roasted its blood dry. After all, no one knew if the two-headed dragon's blood would split again. Therefore, to be on the safe side, Wu-ming directly used the power of the holy spear to roast the two-headed dragon's blood dry. Then, Wu-ming waved his hand at the two-headed dragon's corpse. As a gust of wind blew past, the two-headed dragon's corpse shattered and disappeared. Isha swallowed her saliva. Even though she was a spirit, she was still a little frightened by this scene. Of course, it was not that she was afraid of Wu-ming. She was just afraid of Wu-ming's spear. As expected, that spear is an extremely powerful god's persona weapon. Isha estimated that if she was stabbed in her spirit body, she might be instantly roasted dry. You can say that. Wu-ming shrugged. A relic and a godhead weapon could be considered the same thing. Oh right, can you guys explain to me how the Northern District deals with these doppelgangers of absolute evil? After all, he was here to investigate. Naturally, he had to ask the locals. Of course. Let's have Aisha explain it. Jack replied and nudged Aisha. Why do I have to explain when Jack agreed? Isha looked resentful. It was not that she was unwilling to explain, but she was a little upset that Jack had tricked her again. Roar, roar, roar. There's nothing we can do about it, Isha, because I'm just a pumpkin. Roar, roar, roar. Jack let out a strange laugh. I know, let me explain. Isha tidied up her clothes and patted the dust off her skirt symbolically. Then she began to explain. It was not complicated. The two-headed dragon army that appeared in the Northern District suddenly appeared. Nobody knew how they appeared. The location was between the outer gate of 399, 9999 and 4000000. It was the place where the fire dragon's birth ceremony was held some time ago. As the doppelgangers of absolute evil had appeared there before, the surrounding communities had strengthened the defense facilities there. Therefore, when the two-headed dragons invaded, the area between the outer gate of 399, 9999 and 4 million became the best battlefield to fight against the two-headed dragons. At the same time, the two-headed dragon army that was not eliminated in time did not spread out. Instead, they held on until the great devil of the northern district arrived and eliminated the doppelgangers of absolute evil in one fell swoop. So that's how it is. Letitia had an "so that's how it is" look on her face. Indeed, the doppelgangers of absolute evil that were delayed for a short period of time did not spread out. Instead, they were all wiped out in one fell swoop. This was a problem in itself, but this problem was finally solved. However, why would the enemy release the doppelgangers of absolute evil here? Chapter 819. Sighing helplessly, Wu Ming could be considered to have accepted it. Sure enough, the courtyard is a magical place. Then Wu Ming closed his eyes and began to search. After Wu Ming closed his eyes, Letitia revealed a happy smile. Seeing Wu Ming's helpless expression, Letitia was actually quite happy. However, Wu Ming did not know what Letitia was thinking at the moment. He was now fully releasing his spiritual force, preparing to instantly scan the entire outer door. In the courtyard, Wu Ming's spiritual force was basically in a closed state. Even if it was opened, it could only cover a few meters around him. After all, there were many strange people in the courtyard, and there were also many strong people. If he wantonly used his spiritual force to scan, it would easily cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Then, why did Wu Ming want to wantonly use his spiritual force now? It was not because of the so-called crucial moment, but because Wu Ming was preparing to do a detailed operation, searching without touching anyone. It sounded ridiculous, but it could be done. Or rather, Wu Ming could do it. Wu Ming's spiritual force was extremely powerful. Without touching the human body, Wu Ming could also see that person just by using his spiritual force. However, to search such a large area and find one person among so many people, it was indeed quite difficult. Not to mention that the person might not even be here. However, it was still better than shamelessly looking for Salamandra, right? Moreover, what if he found it? For example, now Wu Ming, who had completely released his spiritual force, saw a transparent world. Every person, every house, every pile of ruins, and even the bloodstains on the ground appeared in Wu Ming's mind. Other than the lack of color, it was a complete God's perspective. And according to Letitia's portrait of Vera, Wu Ming really did find it. In a corner, a young girl with big twin ponytails and prominent breasts looked around, as if confirming that no one had noticed her. Opening his eyes, Wu Ming smiled. As expected, fate is on my side. Could it be that you found Master Vera? Letitia couldn't help but be surprised. To be honest, Letitia did not expect Wu Ming to find Vera here. After all, many people had seen him leave in a hurry. Since that was the case, Vera naturally wouldn't continue to stay here. No, Letitia noticed the problem. The most dangerous place was the safest place. Perhaps the people chasing Vera didn't expect her to choose to stay after dealing with the two-headed dragon. His own cleverness had backfired on him. Not good. Wu Ming suddenly shouted, "What's wrong, Master? Did Master Vera discover you?" Letitia guessed. That's right. Wu Ming nodded and snapped his fingers. A dark purple ripple appeared. Quick, Vera wants to escape, Wu Ming said as he pulled Letitia into the portal. In Wu Ming's vision, Vera, who was carefully looking around, suddenly looked in Wu Ming's direction. Obviously, she realized that someone had discovered her. Then Vera turned into a ball of willow. The wisp and quickly moved in a certain direction. As soon as the wisp left, the dark purple ripple appeared where Vera originally was. Wu Ming and Letitia jumped out of the ripple and looked around. Looks like Master Vera has escaped. Letitia could still feel the residual energy in the air. Indeed, but in this place that has become my backyard, Vera can't escape. Ming raised his hand and snapped his fingers again. The portal appeared again. Ming's spirit scan was still active. How could he let Vera escape? Ming walked into the portal with a confident smile. Let's go, Letitia, we'll intercept them. As you wish, master. On the other side, a ball of willow. The wisp escaped into an alley. Dispelling the willow. The wisp, Vera revealed her true form. She looked behind her, and made sure that no one was following her. After a short moment of thought, Vera decided to leave. But it was this short moment of thought that caused Vera to lose the chance to leave. Where do you think you're going? Willow's Wisp's leader Vera za Ignufast. The dark purple ripple appeared behind Vera, and a rather calm voice was heard. Vera jumped and pulled away, revealing a vigilant look. A man and a woman walked out of the dark purple ripple. They were Ming and Letitia who were looking for Vera. By the way, master, your words can easily be misunderstood. Letitia complained to Ming helplessly. Ming was stunned for a moment before he reacted. Indeed, his current actions and the words he said just now clearly didn't seem like a good person. I'm sorry, Willow's Wisp's leader. I apologize for my rudeness. Ming apologized. Vera did not run away again, perhaps because Ming's apology worked. However, Vera seemed to be relieved. Ming also took the opportunity to observe Vera again. Unlike Letitia's black and white painting, the real person was much prettier than Letitia's. She had sharp ears like a fairy's, white hair that was tied into two thick ponytails, and even her eyelashes were white. She wore a black skirt with blue laces and a low neckline that exposed her shoulders. The extremely low neckline accentuated Vera's extraordinary breasts, which was extremely eye-catching. More importantly, her face was extremely cute, with a hint of charm in her innocence. And if Ming was not mistaken, she seemed to be a little naive. Although Vera was indeed beautiful, Ming only looked at Vera for a few seconds before starting a formal conversation. I'm Vera Silence, Eddie of no name. This is my relative, Letitia Decrea. I've been entrusted by White Wuxia to investigate the matter of absolute evil's doppelganger. So, can you please stop running? Ming naturally did not come to the North District because of White Wuxia's request. However, there had to be a reason for everything, and White Wuxia was the best reason. Even if it was an investigation, Ming believed that White Wuxia would not expose Ming. Therefore, Ming calmly used White Wuxia as a reason. Vera did not speak, but her little head nodded slightly, indicating that she would not run anymore. In fact, when Vera saw who it was, she did not want to run anymore. As long as it was not that guy, everything was fine. Then I'll get straight to the point. Before Absolute Evil's clone caused trouble, did you encounter an enemy? Vera raised her head and poked her chin with one hand. She thought for a moment and silently shook her head, which was very cute. But after shaking her head, Vera immediately nodded again. This made Ming and Letitia confused. In the end, under Ming and Letitia's puzzled gaze, Vera walked up to Ming and pulled up Ming's sleeve. Help me. Chapter 820. Unlike the traditional demons as a demon, Vera's voice was exceptionally light, just like an elf's. It was not an exaggeration to say that listening to Vera's voice was a pleasure. Moreover, Vera's "help me," coupled with her current expression, could be said to be lovely and moving. Not only Ming, but even Letitia's heart had some ripples. First, tell me what's going on, Vera. Ming paused for a moment before continuing. Can I call you that? Vera was actually very casual when it came to addressing her, so Vera nodded, indicating that she agreed. After Vera nodded, Ming immediately asked, Then Vera, what difficulties have you encountered? Ming half squatted down. At this moment, the Vera in front of Ming didn't seem like the leader of the Willow's Wisp, but more like a little sister asking for help. There's a pervert following me. Pulling on Ming's sleeve, Vera's eyebrows twitched slightly, her body shrunk, and her eyes looked around as if she was afraid that the pervert would suddenly jump out. Pervert? Ming and Letitia couldn't help but be stunned. The first thought that appeared in their minds was that it was inconceivable. Who would dare to follow Vera? After all, Vera wasn't an ordinary person. She was the leader of the Willow's Wisp community in the Northern District, the strongest in the Northern District, a great demon born between life and death, and could easily deal with absolute evil's army of doppelgangers. There was actually someone who dared to follow such a strong person. But then again, if the other party dared to be the pervert tailing, he might not be weak. Otherwise, why would this pervert make Vera show such a disgusted and helpless expression? Vera, can you tell me about this pervert? For example, his name. No matter what, he still needed to know about this pervert. Wu-ming wanted to see just which arrogant fellow actually tailed the strongest in the northern district. Vera nodded, her tone still light as she said the other party's name. His name is Maxwell. Maxwell. Wu-ming subconsciously repeated. Why did Maxwell come to the northern district? And he even became a pervert, who tailed them? But on second thought, Wu-ming felt relieved. The twin-headed dragons were closely related to Maxwell. Since an army of twin-headed dragons had appeared in the northern district, it made sense for Maxwell to be here. However, sizing up Vera, Wu-ming could not help but guess. Could it be that he was a Lullicon? No. How could that be? In any case, the other party was someone who was rather calm in front of him. How could he be a pervert? Perhaps the other party was tailing Vera in order to prevent him from providing support. Only then would it be logical. Master, do you know that guy called Maxwell? Letitia couldn't help but look at Wu-ming. After all, Wu-ming's expression was too obvious. Perhaps Wu-ming knew Maxwell, or perhaps he knew this person. I do know Maxwell. Wu-ming frowned slightly, recalling the unpleasant meeting with Maxwell. Letitia, do you remember that I once pretended to be someone from Perseus, to meet the person who wanted to buy you? I remember, Master. Letitia nodded. But what happened in the end? You didn't tell me, nor did you tell the others from No Name. The person I met wasn't an ordinary buyer. If I'm not mistaken, the absolute evil doppelganger incident that affected the entire suitcase was done by them. It's indeed shocking, Letitia said calmly. Vera, on the other hand, was startled. Letitia's calmness was also within Wu-ming's expectations. After all, the last time he went to talk to White Wuxia, Letitia was by his side. Letitia did have some guesses because of Wu-ming and White Wuxia's words, and Wu-ming's words just now confirmed Letitia's suspicions. The other party once wanted to buy Letitia. This was what Wu-ming had said at the time, and Letitia had deduced from this sentence. At that time, I captured 2 of Maxwell's companions. In the end, some absolute evil doppelganger inexplicably appeared and attacked me. Maxwell took the opportunity to save his companions. Wu-ming would get back at the other party for the loss he suffered at the other party's hands sooner or later. If it's Maxwell, I think I understand why Vera is so distressed. That was because Maxwell had an inexplicable resurrection ability, at least on the surface. Vera, did you kill Maxwell several times, but in the end, he appeared in front of you unscathed? As soon as Wu-ming said this, Vera immediately nodded desperately as if she had met a confidant. Wu-ming thought to himself that it was indeed the case. At that time, Wu-ming did indeed kill Maxwell, and did not show any mercy. Logically speaking, that sense of reality would not lie, but for the sake of caution, Wu-ming had never been able to completely confirm Maxwell's resurrection. And after Vera's confirmation, Wu-ming could also be considered to have confirmed that Maxwell did indeed have an inexplicable resurrection ability. Master, you mean that Maxwell can be resurrected? Letitia was shocked. No matter when or which world it was, resurrection was always a shocking matter. Not to mention Maxwell's unlimited resurrection ability. But Master, will there really be the gift of unlimited resurrection? What Letitia meant was whether or not the other party had used some other method or gift to master the ability that looked like resurrection in the eyes of outsiders. At the very least, from our point of view, Maxwell has indeed been resurrected. As if responding to Wu-ming's words, Vera's little head nodded fiercely. Since the 2 powerhouses, Wu-ming and Vera, had said so, Letitia, who had never seen Maxwell's resurrection, had to obey the majority. If that's the case, then this Maxwell will be difficult to deal with. Letitia crossed her arms in distress. Just the uncontrollable resurrection ability alone was enough. Vera had no choice but to hide from Maxwell. Indeed, In addition to the resurrection ability, Maxwell is also a 4-digit demon king, and he has the ability to teleport multiple units. These two-headed dragons were probably transported by him. The teleportation ability could be used to attack and defend, save teammates, escape, and transport the two-headed dragon army. The opponent was a 4-digit demon king, and he also had a troublesome resurrection ability. It was a powerful enemy. Of course, if Wuming could find the main body, Wuming could keep Maxwell in a constant state of resurrection. With that in mind, Wuming's thoughts drifted back to his main body. He wondered how the main body's injuries were recovering. The feeling of being blasted by the black mud was not pleasant. Back then, after Wuming transferred his mind to the backup machine of the root, Wuming still suffered from mental damage, and it was not light. As for how the main body was injured, Wuming, who had completely cut off the connection, did not know. He had to hurry. With that in mind, Wuming looked at Vera again. Maxwell's group seemed to know the whereabouts of Wuming's main body, and it just so happened that Maxwell bumped into the muzzle of the gun. If Wuming did not shoot, it would be a waste of Maxwell's rare action. Then Wuming, who was looking at Vera, spoke. Vera, can you tell us more about Maxwell? Chapter 821. With Vera's approval, Wuming and Letitia left with Vera. Wuming opened the portal, and the three of them returned to No Name's base. In the conference room of No Name, Wuming and Vera sat together on the sofa. This was because Vera did not let go of Wuming's sleeve after pulling it up. Vera did not care about Wuming's distress. She seemed to be very curious about Wuming's portal as she looked at the location where the portal had disappeared. Is there something you care about, Vera? Wuming looked at the place where Vera was looking, but did not find anything special. Vera did not say anything. She only reached out her hand and pointed at the place where the portal had disappeared. Master Vera should be interested in your teleportation portal, Master. Letitia poured tea for Vera as she answered Wuming. Master Vera can freely control the realm gate. To a certain extent, Master Vera has the same ability as you. Thank you, Vera thanked Letitia in an adorable tone, but she didn't have the slightest self-awareness. She hugged the teacup with both hands. You're welcome, Master Vera. Letitia was very pleased and nodded with a smile. Then Letitia came to Wuming's side and poured tea for Wuming. Wuming's eyes lit up because of Letitia's words. Vera could freely control the realm gate, and this ability was indeed very similar to Wuming's portal. However, the realm gate was fixed, while Wuming's ability was not. Moreover, Wuming's portal could only be used to go to places. However, both had their advantages. Then we are really fated. Wuming smiled. Vera still did not speak, only her little head nodded fiercely. At this time, Letitia, who was standing behind Wuming, spoke. Sir Vera, please tell us more about Maxwell. After all, Wuming and Letitia brought Vera back to No Name to obtain information about Maxwell. Therefore, Vera began a very short explanation. Because Vera did not speak much, Wuming and Letitia could only speculate further from Vera's words. However, because Vera tried her best to avoid Maxwell, Vera did not know much about Maxwell. Most of the information she said was the same as what Wuming knew. Combined with the information previously known, it could be summarized into the following points. Maxwell was a newly promoted demon king who came from the outside. He had control over ice and fire, multiple units of teleportation, as well as the strange ability to resurrect. He was also connected with Absolute Evil's doppelganger. Apart from this, Wuming also knew one more thing. Maxwell didn't just start tailing Vera. Instead, he started tailing her before she even arrived at the box court. According to Vera, it was because she could not stand Maxwell's tailing that Vera came to the box. Wuming, who knew the truth, had a complicated feeling, because from this it could be seen that Maxwell was really a pervert. But Wuming looked at Vera's extremely unscientific body and her naturally beautiful face. Vera noticed Wuming's gaze and responded to Wuming with her head tilted in confusion. Wuming seemed to understand Maxwell's perverted behavior. Huff! Wuming sighed and lay down on the sofa behind him. Even if they managed to gather information on Maxwell, he would still be a huge problem. And this big problem was his strange resurrection ability. Although he could choose to trap Maxwell, don't forget that Maxwell also had the ability to teleport. Moreover, he did not know if he still had other abilities because Vera just said that she tried her best to avoid Maxwell. It was not easy for a natural airhead like Vera to know a lot of information about someone she hated the most, and tried her best to avoid. Oh right, Wuming also knew the main reason why Vera was not the ruler of the hierarchy. It was because of Vera's natural airhead attribute. Speaking of which, Vera, where did you meet Maxwell? Since he could not think of a way to deal with Maxwell, he had to change the entry point. 54545 Outer Gate. Vera answered truthfully. 54545 Outer Gate? Wuming was stunned. If I remember correctly, Wuming said and looked at Letitia. That's right, Master. Outer Gate 54545 is where Salamandra's headquarters is located. Letitia confirmed. Vera, other than Maxwell, did you meet anyone else? For example, Maxwell's companions or something. Vera tapped her cheeks, thought for a moment, and finally shook her head. That guy's vigilance is quite high. Wuming frowned. But thinking about it carefully, for something like tailing, no matter how thick-skinned Maxwell was, it was impossible for him to bring his companions. Master, do you want to go to 54545 Outer Gate to take a look? After a brief consideration, Wuming nodded. I can go take a look. But at this moment, a piece of parchment floated in from the window and automatically flew to the coffee table in front of Wuming. The parchment was engraved with the emblem of two goddesses, which was the symbol of 1,000 eyes. Could it be White Yiksha? Wuming picked up the parchment and turned it around to read. Master, is there a new situation? Letitia asked worriedly. Vera also looked at Wuming curiously. Wuming raised his head and looked at Letitia and Vera. The Southern District was attacked again. 210-5380 Outer Gate. Thousand Eyes Branch. Although White Yiksha was sitting on the mattress like the previous few times, White Yiksha now had his eyes closed and his arms crossed in front of his chest. He looked like he had a headache. Blackish-purple ripples appeared, and White Yiksha immediately opened his eyes. Wuming, Letitia, and Vera walked out of the portal. Vera? I didn't expect you to kidnap her to the Eastern District. White Yiksha looked particularly surprised before revealing a gentlemanly smile. She didn't expect Wuming to bring Vera to the Eastern District. Vera looked at White Yiksha in disdain before shrinking behind Wuming and tugging at his sleeve. How's the Southern District now, White Yiksha? Wuming ignored White Yiksha's frivolity and immediately asked. Don't worry. Sit. Seeing Wuming's arrival, White Yiksha changed his previous demeanor and became very calm. Seeing White Yiksha's calm expression, Wuming didn't look anxious at all and sat down facing White Yiksha. White Yiksha spoke first. To be honest, I didn't expect you to come so quickly. After all, Wuming had gone to the Northern District to investigate. On the parchment that White Yiksha sent to no name, he only wrote that he saw a trip to the 210-5380 Outer Gates, Thousand Eyes Branch. Then I'm really sorry, Wuming replied indifferently. This made White Yiksha glare at Wuming. Forget it. Let's talk business. The Southern District was attacked again. Chapter 822. After the absolute evil clones in the South District were defeated by the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion, the Harvest Festival couldn't continue. Although Wuming did not know how many absolute evil clones attacked the South District, the number should be about the same as the absolute evil clones that attacked the East District. If Wuming had not used his authority, he would not have been able to deal with such a number. Therefore, Wuming had expected the South District to be unable to continue the Harvest Festival. Of course, because the Harvest Festival was about to end, the organizer, the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion, directly moved the Harvest Festival to the Midnight Festival. The Midnight Festival was like a party after a large-scale event. In short, it was a summary. However, Wuming could not help but ask about this. Wait a minute, absolute evil clones aren't a small matter, right? Why does the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion want to continue the Midnight Festival? The absolute evil clones were one of the final human trials. Wuming did not think that the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion was unaware of this. As for Maxwell and the others, not to mention that they had an unknown number of absolute evil clones, The other party was in existence that attacked the entire box. Facing such an enemy, even White Yiksha was troubled. Yet the dragon horn griffin lion still had the mood to continue the midnight festival? Actually, this harvest festival is similar to the Fire Dragon Birth Festival in the North District. It's a grand event for the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion Alliance's speaker to become the ruler of the South District. Naturally, it can't end carelessly. Wuming nodded and said thoughtfully, "I was negligent." Although Wuming did not care much about his reputation, it was indeed a matter of importance to the collective. However, it's also related to the fact that the South District did not suffer any losses, White Yiksha added. Ahem, that's a digression. Immediately after, White Yiksha coughed and began the overall story. Just after you left for the North District, the South District was attacked again. It was still absolute evil clones. White Yiksha took out a piece of parchment and placed it in front of Wuming with a serious expression. Wuming picked up the parchment and read it. The parchment contained information from the South District. The transmission method was the same as when White Yiksha sent the parchment to No Name. How is that possible? Does he have an endless supply of absolute evil doppelgangers? Letitia was shocked. It would have been understandable if other fiend kings had attacked. After all, it was excusable for them to attack while the people in the South District were exhausted after dealing with Absolute Evil's avatar. However, it was still Absolute Evil's doppelganger that attacked him. This proved that the ones who came to attack this time were still the same group of people who had caused the attacks in the 4 districts of boxing: East, South, West and North. Furthermore, the other party even had a clone of Absolute Evil. After all, the number of Absolute Evil clones at the end of the Fire Dragon's birth ritual, as well as the Absolute Evil clones that attacked the North, South, East, and West districts, was already quite terrifying. However, even after exhausting so many of Absolute Evil's doppelgangers, the other party still had reserves. How could Letitia not be surprised? I think so too, but this is the truth. White Yiksha sighed helplessly. Fortunately, the members of No Name listened to Master Ru's words and didn't return. You should know that it wasn't just 16 knights and the others. Ren was also in the limelight in the battle against Absolute Evil's clone. White Yiksha opened his folding fan and gently fanned himself. He was very satisfied with No Name gaining reputation again. I see. It must be Argel's doing. Wuming was relieved. He then put down the parchment. After Wuming sold off Luo's community, Perseus, Wuming, who did not need Argel's strength, handed Argel to Ren. Ren's gift could ignore the difference in strength between the contractor and perfectly control the contractor. After all, Argel was the astral spirit, the leader of the 3 strongest races in Boxing East. When Argel was at his peak, even if he was not comparable to White Yiksha, he was already extremely powerful. In the end, Argel was bound by the so-called inheritance. In the end, he lost his rationality and had a large number of shackles placed on his body. He was then used by the profligate Luos. As there were too many shackles on Argel, removing them all at once would cause irreversible damage to Argel. Therefore, Ren's gift could not completely restore Argel to his peak. However, Argel's combat strength in Ren's hands was much stronger than when he was in Luo's hands. Furthermore, Wuming also believed that sooner or later, Argel would return to his peak in Ren's hands. That's right. Argel's demon eyes of petrification have a natural restraining effect on Absolute Evil's doppelgangers. It's all thanks to Ren. I just received news that the Absolute Evil doppelgangers that attacked again have all been eliminated. White Yiksha said as he took out another parchment. After all, Argel's demon eyes of petrification could also petrify the blood of the Absolute Evil doppelgangers. In that case, there would be no blood proliferation. So you're keeping us in suspense, White Yiksha. Wuming did not know whether to laugh or cry. He took the parchment in White Yiksha's hand and looked at it. Although I do have such intentions, cough cough cough, I've also been troubled by the matter of the Absolute Evil doppelgangers. White Yiksha, who quickly changed his words, had a melancholic expression. After all, the enemy has repeatedly attacked the various districts. This is definitely not a simple attack. If it was not a simple revenge on society, then there must be a reason or a purpose. Obviously, it could not be the former, so it must be the latter. But we have no way of knowing what the other party is trying to do. Letitia sighed. Perhaps it was to confuse people that the other party attacked the 4 districts in the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern District. Now they had attacked the Southern District again. Moreover, the other party has a teleportation-type gift. It's not easy to catch them. We haven't caught the other party's tail, so we have no idea where to start. Wuming crossed his arms helplessly. If he had known this would happen, Wuming would not have let Maxwell save the man and beast that he had captured. However, Wuming looked at Vera, who was kneeling beside him and tugging at his sleeve. At the moment, he could only rely on Vera. Through Vera, he could find Maxwell and use her to contact him. In the end, Wuming looked at White Wuxia. Since the Southern District has been attacked again, you should pay more attention to the Eastern District. After all, since the other party could attack the Southern District again, it was possible that they could attack the Eastern District again. Of course, it was the same for the Northern and Western Districts. Don't worry, leave it to me. However, where are you going? Since Wuming said that, it must be because he was not going to stay in the Eastern District. White Wuxia understood that. I'm going to take a look at the Northern District again. Wuming stood up and prepared to leave. However, at that moment, a piece of parchment flew in from the window and landed in White Wuxia's hands. White Wuxia's expression changed when he saw the contents of the parchment. The Northern District has been attacked again. Chapter 8:23. What? Letitia was alarmed. Vera didn't say a word, but her eyes revealed a hint of worry. Even if she wasn't a Stratum ruler, she still took the safety of the North District very seriously. After all, she was the leader of Willow's Wisp and a member of the North District. Wuming frowned and immediately said, "Tell me the location." "Tell me the location. I'll be there immediately." Wuming really didn't expect that the North District would be attacked, just as he said that the other districts might be attacked. White Wuxia didn't say a word as he threw the parchment to Wuming. Wuming caught the parchment and took a closer look. Has Salamandra's headquarters been attacked? Wuming thought to himself. Indeed. It was now certain that Vera's encounter with Maxwell at the outer gate of 54,545 wasn't a coincidence. Instead, it had been premeditated by the other party. As for Salamandra, it was a 5-digit community and didn't have any high-end combat strength. Just Maxwell alone was enough to give Salamandra a hard time. Furthermore, Maxwell's companions might be there as well. I think the other party is quite premeditated. White Wuxia's expression was somewhat gloomy. By repeatedly attacking the box court, not only did this mean that they didn't take the Stratum Guardians seriously, but it also meant that the other party was on the move. Right on the heels of that, White Wuxia looked at Wuming. Although the letter asks for my assistance, Salamandra is an ally of No Name, and the letter also states that you have already sent a distress letter to No Name. It was true that No Name was an ally of Salamandra, but distant water couldn't quench a nearby fire. It was unlikely that Salamandra didn't understand this principle. Even if Shadora knew that Wuming had a teleportation door, Wuming had never been to the outer gate of 54,545, so the teleportation door couldn't be used. From the looks of it, Salamandra was only asking for help symbolically. They mainly wanted to rely on White Wuxia. The branches of Thousand Eyes were interconnected, and the branches of Thousand Eyes were spread across the 4 districts. Therefore, White Wuxia could move to other districts through the branches. However, White Wuxia couldn't go with Wuming. What if the East District was attacked again the moment they left? Stay in the East District. Also, help me protect No Name. Even without White Wuxia, Wuming had his own means of heading to the North District. Wuming tossed the parchment aside and walked towards the door. Wuming was not a so-called good person. In a situation where he could not protect everyone, he would take a step back and choose to protect his own people. No Name. White Wuxia and ease. Of White Wuxia, of White Wuxia, White Wuxia, White Wuxia's White Wuxia of S and Eyes. Of White of Yak? 3 years ago, When the infernal Yuxia attacked No Name, White Yuxia should have gone to meet the attack. However, she knew that as a 4-digit number, she didn't have the ability to deal with the infernal Yuxia that attacked No Name. Why was that? 3 years ago, No Name was the largest community in the East District. It had many high-end combat forces. Even a 4-digit number of White Yuxia couldn't deal with No Name. Even so, an infernal Yuxia still attacked No Name. From this, it could be seen that the enemy was very powerful. It was likely to be in the double digits, or at least in the triple digits. White Yuxia naturally wouldn't be afraid of such an enemy in the past. This required White Yuxia to return her godhood and retrieve her spirit spark. However, 3 years ago, White Yuxia hesitated. And it was this hesitation that caused No Name to become what it was now. And White Yuxia felt guilty for 3 years. Black Rabbit's frequent hosting of the gift competition was actually one of White Yuxia's ways of compensating No Name. In the name of White Yuxia, leave the East District and No Name in my hands. That was White Yuxia's former name. It was his name when he was an infernal Yuxia. After nodding, Wuming took Vera and walked out of the room without looking back. In Wuming's opinion, White Yuxia's words were enough. Letitia bowed to White Yuxia and then turned to leave. Gotcha. Letitia closed the door. The sound of the door closing was particularly prominent in the room, where only White Yuxia was left. White Yuxia, who was sitting on the cushion, waved his hand. The parchment that Wuming had casually thrown away flew into White Yuxia's hand. 54545 Outer Gate. White Yuxia closed his eyes slightly. It was unknown what he was thinking about. Then the parchment in White Yuxia's hand instantly burned. White Yuxia waved his hand and the flames burned out. The parchment also burned to ashes. Then the room returned to silence. Outside the Vis and Yes branch, Letitia caught up with Wuming. Master, how do you plan to go to the North District? Letitia's question made Wuming stop. After all, even if he used a teleportation door, Wuming could not directly go to the 54545 Outer Gate. He would have to put in more effort. Regarding this problem, I plan to ask Vera for help. Wuming said as he looked at Vera, who was still tugging at his sleeve. Vera tilted her head. Her face was expressionless, but Wuming could tell from her eyes that Vera was saying yes. Indeed, we can ask Lady Vera to send us there. Villo could control the realm door and instantly go to the 54545 Outer Gate. And Letitia had also thought of the idea that Wuming had thought of. How about it, Vera? Can you help me? Wuming asked Vera. Vera nodded her little head, indicating that she could. Then, Master, there's no time to lose. Let's set off quickly. After all, the Demon King that attacked the North District could not be resisted by Salamandra alone, not to mention that the attacker might have companions. Moreover, the strongest combat power in the North District had been brought to Wuming's side. The 54545 Outer Gate was very dangerous at the moment. If they delayed for too long, Salamandra might be completely wiped out. However, Wuming rejected Letitia's suggestion. No, Letitia, you stay in No Name. Vera and I will go to the North District. Master. Letitia was confused for a moment. Because she was a maid. Letitia had developed the habit of following her master around. Therefore, Letitia was a little reluctant to not let her go to the North District with Wuming. Wuming reached out and pressed Letitia's head. He rubbed Letitia's beautiful blonde hair. No matter what, No Name has to leave a powerhouse behind. I have no intention of leaving everything to White Yuxia alone. Then Wuming smiled at Letitia. Our community, can I leave it to you, Letitia? Letitia was momentarily stunned by Wuming's smile, but then Letitia came back to her senses. The rejections in his heart also vanished. Yes, leave it to me, Master. With a confident expression, Letitia affirmed Wuming's decision. Letitia spread her wings and flew up into the sky. She then flew towards the location of No Name. Finally, Wuming looked at Vera. Please, Vera. Chapter 824. North District, 54545 Outer Gate. A huge gate stood in the fiery red square. Due to the Demon King's attack, there was no one around the square. However, traces of panic could be seen on the ground. At that time, the unimportant items in the people's hands had all turned into trash lying on the ground, reflecting the panic of the people. In contrast to the empty realm gate, there was a city called Blazing Flames City not far away, which was full of chaos. At this moment, the realm gate, which was a film of light, fluctuated a little, which was a sign that someone was about to come out of the realm gate. Pop! Like a bubble bursting, a man and a woman jumped out of the realm gate. Patter! The man hugged the girl, stood on the ground and looked around. Is this the 54545 outer gate? The newcomers were naturally Wu Ming and Vera. Vera, who was nestled in Wu Ming's arms, nodded silently, then pulled on Wu Ming's sleeve, indicating Wu Ming to put her down. I'm sorry, Vera. Wu Ming quickly and gently put Vera on the ground. After all, for people who had just met, this was considered rude. However, because Wu Ming was in a hurry and Vera kept pulling on Wu Ming's sleeve, Wu Ming, who was in a hurry, directly carried Vera and flew into the realm gate controlled by Vera. However, Vera wasn't dissatisfied at all. Perhaps to Vera, as long as it wasn't Maxwell, she could accept anyone with a good impression. After putting Vera down, Wu Ming looked at the huge red city not far away, Blazing Flame City. Sure enough, it was attacked by the Demon King. With Wu Ming's eyesight, he could see that there were barbarian-like giants holding long sticks, destroying the city. And those who were stopping and attacking these giants were vipers flying in the sky, as well as the half-dragons on their backs. Without a doubt, those were the viper cavalrymen that Salamandra was proud of. However, in the face of these giants, the viper dragon cavalry that they were so proud of played a role. Perhaps Wu Ming could not see the members of Salamandra, who were blocking the giants on the ground of Blazing Flame Capital. Quick, Vera, let's hurry over. Wu Ming said and was about to leave. However, she pulled Wu Ming's sleeve. Wu Ming turned his head and saw Vera's adorable and charming face. However, her face was filled with disgust. Vera. Wu Ming was confused. However, in the next moment, Wu Ming, who had understood something, instantly spread out his mental strength. Who is it? Wu Ming frowned and looked ahead. The voice that was infused with magic spread out in all directions in a visible sound wave. Not far away, some figures suddenly appeared outside the nearest city gate of Brilliant Flame Capital. Among them was Maxwell, who looked quite gentlemanly but was quite perverted. Vera frowned because she noticed Maxwell's presence. Vera, who saw Maxwell, was even more disgusted and began to hide behind Wu Ming. If Wu Ming was not mistaken, Maxwell shamelessly showed an extremely gentlemanly smile to himself, or to Vera who was behind him. However, that smile disgusted Wu Ming no matter how he looked at it. Immediately afterward, Maxwell waved his hand, and Maxwell and the few people around him disappeared in an instant. Maxwell and the others who disappeared did not escape because their ambush was discovered. Instead, they appeared in front of Wu Ming and Vera. Ah, my bride, I finally see you again. Maxwell, pretending to be affectionate, stretched out his hand to Vera and smiled rather disgustingly. However, Maxwell's behavior made Vera, who was originally showing her head, completely shrink behind Wu Ming. Seeing this scene, Maxwell's originally smiling face instantly became gloomy. So that's how it is. It was you who kidnapped my bride. Maxwell looked at Wu Ming as if he was thinking of a way to kill Wu Ming and take back his bride. However, this made Wu Ming feel even more disgusted. Just how little self-awareness did Maxwell have? Can't he see that Vera actually hates him? However, just as Wu Ming was about to open his mouth to mock Maxwell, one of Maxwell's companions spoke. Nice to meet you, Mr. Vera Cyrus Eddy. My subordinates will be in your care. A youthful voice entered Wu Ming's ears. Following Maxwell were two black-cloaked people. Wu Ming had an impression of one of the black-cloaked people. It was the girl who was captured by Wu Ming along with the griffin when Wu Ming went to meet the buyer who wanted to buy Letitia from Perseus. The one who spoke just now was the other black-cloaked person beside the girl. Seems like you are their master. Wu Ming confirmed. After all, the word subordinate was used, so he must be the other party's leader, without a doubt. Not at all. We are just companions working together. I can't be called master. The youth was rather humble. It didn't seem like he was talking to an enemy at all. Instead, it seemed like he was talking to a good friend. However, Wu-ming felt that the youth was purposely calling them companions. Because the girl beside the youth seemed like a subordinate, but Maxwell didn't seem like a subordinate at all. Logically speaking, once the leader spoke to the other party, the subordinate should have retreated and stopped what he was doing. However, Maxwell didn't do so. He still looked like he wanted to kill Wu-ming, and his mouth kept muttering words like, "I'll kill you." This was clearly something that only people who didn't put the youth as their master in their eyes would do. Seems like Maxwell's relationship with these people isn't that simple. Wu-ming thought to himself, "Your companion is a bit mentally unstable right now." Wu-ming pointed at Maxwell rather politely. However, the youth didn't say anything. Also, Wu-ming didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the youth was rather helpless. This made Wu-ming squint his eyes. Sure enough, Maxwell and the other party weren't just companions, then. Wu-ming pointed at the youth again. Also, I'm not interested in people who hide their heads and don't dare to show their true faces. However, the youth just smiled at this. Then the youth spoke to Maxwell. "Maxwell, leave the villa to us, Vera, your bride. I'll leave it to you." The youth had to change the way he addressed Vera, because of Maxwell's fierce gaze. However, Wu-ming just smiled at this. "Count Vera's share as mine." In the end, Wu-ming looked at Maxwell with a rather contemptuous gaze. "Although I don't want to fight with a guy that I easily defeated again." Chapter 825. However, even though he knew that Wu-ming was an extremely powerful dragon species, Maxwell's expression began to distort as if he had gone berserk. "Then go to hell." Maxwell roared crazily and placed his hands on both sides of his body as if he was summoning something. In an instant, ice and fire emerged from both sides of Wu-ming, forming a spiral of ice and fire that rushed madly towards Wu-ming. It was unknown whether Maxwell didn't care about Vera's safety at all, or whether he knew that Vera wouldn't be hurt by this move. But Maxwell's move completely included Vera in his attack range. If it was the former, then good. Maxwell was a complete scumbag. If it was the latter, it would be even better. Because if it couldn't hurt Vera, it naturally couldn't hurt Wu-ming. However, Wu-ming wouldn't just stand there and let his opponent attack him. Even if Maxwell's attack couldn't hurt Vera, he couldn't let Maxwell be so arrogant. Maxwell looked at them with a crooked clown smile, but the boy and girl beside Maxwell didn't react at all. If he couldn't even block such an attack, then he wasn't qualified to be their opponent at all. This was indeed the case. Swish. The smoke and explosion were separated by an unknown object, dispersing to both sides, revealing Wu-ming and Vera in the middle. At this moment, Wu-ming was holding a sword that shone like gold and contained a sacred and ancient aura. There was no doubt that it was this sword that had blocked Maxwell's icy flames and slashed them apart. "It's a godhead weapon," the young man said calmly. According to the information gathered, the most important thing to pay attention to was that the other party's spirit of incantation had been bestowed with a powerful ability. This ability was extremely powerful, and it had once instantly destroyed Maxwell. He had never heard of the other party using a godhead armament. However, the girl standing beside the boy didn't find it strange. "It's not strange for him to have one or two godhead equipment, Your Highness." The girl still remembered clearly how Wu-ming had played her in the palm of his hand. She also remembered how Wu-ming had beaten up Maxwell. She was not surprised that such an expert would have a god deity equipment. "You're right. I was careless, Ling," the young man called His Highness smiled. "Vera, leave for a while." Wu-ming patted Vera's little head, and then opened the teleportation portal, indicating for Vera to enter. "You're not allowed to touch her." With a teleport, the gloomy Maxwell instantly appeared in front of Wu-ming. However, Xing, Wu-ming slashed at Maxwell who was in front of him. "What?" Maxwell, who couldn't react in time, was instantly split into two. The auras of the girl named Her Highness and the girl named Ling also became serious. Godhead armaments were also divided into grades. They didn't pay much attention to the godhead equipment in Wu-ming's hand that they had never seen before. It was the same for Maxwell, but who would have thought that Maxwell would be cut into two pieces like a hot knife cutting through butter? Maxwell, who was split into two, turned into blue particles and dissipated. However, a few seconds later, A new Maxwell appeared beside Her Highness and Ling. Damn it. Maxwell gritted his teeth, and his face began to twist. One had to know that Maxwell was a 4-digit demon lord. If it was an ordinary Godhead equipment, it definitely wouldn't be able to break through Maxwell's defense. That's not an ordinary Godhead equipment, Her Highness judged. Although Godhead equipment was a general term, there were also differences in strength. In the understanding of the Xingyue world, they were treasures, and treasures were also divided into grades. For example, the leader of Perseus, Luos, had the scythe, helmet, and boots that were passed down by Perseus. These were all Godhead equipment, just that their grades were relatively low. No, it couldn't be said like that. It should be said that compared to Gungnir, the main god's Godhead equipment, their power wasn't strong. As for high-level Godhead weapons, the Gungnir that was mentioned earlier was one of them, and Silent Cry had a typical example, such as the Black Rabbit's Vajra replica. Although Black Rabbit's Vajra replica was a replica of the genuine Vajra scepter possessed by Sakura, and its power couldn't be compared, because it was bestowed by Sakura, the replica's power was also quite strong. And Wuming's Blade of Salvation wasn't weaker than Gungnir and Vajra replica. It even had a higher grade weapon that surpassed these Godhead equipment. Why? Because the Blade of Salvation wasn't just a weapon. Its true ability was to store other Godhead equipment. Just when Maxwell, His Highness, and Belle were surprised, Wuming looked at Vera again. Vera, listen to me, leave here first, I'll pick you up later. Wuming said to Vera gently as if he was talking to a child. Villo, are you okay? Vera rarely spoke. Vera knew how difficult it was to deal with Maxwell. Plus, he had 2 companions, so Vera was inevitably worried that Wuming wouldn't be able to defeat him. However, Wuming couldn't help but laugh. Who do you think I am, Vera? They can't hurt me. Vera nodded silently and hurriedly walked in, as if she didn't want to stay in the same place as Maxwell. No, my bride. Maxwell watched Vera walk into the portal with a heart-wrenching expression. If he didn't know, he would have thought that Vera was led astray by Wuming. Closing the portal, Wuming turned his head to look at Maxwell and the others, and stretched his neck a little. Let me show you the true power of the Blade of Salvation. With that, Wuming gently threw the Blade of Salvation behind him. As if it merged into an unknown space, a ripple appeared behind Wuming. The moment the ripple appeared, Maxwell felt danger. In an instant, Maxwell had the idea that he must stop Wuming. He could indeed resurrect, or rather, ordinary attacks couldn't kill him, but this didn't mean that he didn't feel pain. The pain caused by the attack was still there. The boy named His Highness and the girl named Belle also felt danger, but because Wuming's main target was Maxwell, the two weren't as nervous as Maxwell. After all, it was Maxwell who provoked Wuming. The two of them didn't do anything. Indeed, Wuming didn't intend to attack His Highness and Belle. His main target was Maxwell. But as for whether Wuming would be affected by the wide range of damage caused by Maxwell's attack, that wasn't Wuming's concern. Buzz! Electric lines emerged from the ripples on Wuming's back, and formed one square lattice after another. The square lattices were arranged in a rather orderly manner. His Highness couldn't help but widen his eyes at this scene. Manchala Square? At that moment, weapons emerged from every square lattice. There were swords, single-edged sabers, broadswords, spears, stone pestles, spears, halberds, and other weapons. Not only that, but all of them were aimed at Maxwell's position. These weapons carried an ancient, mysterious, and powerful aura. When such an aura appeared on the weapons, it meant that all of them are Godhead armaments. Maxwell suddenly felt a sense of crisis when he saw this scene. However, in the next second, these weapons shot toward Maxwell like bullets from a loaded gun. Chapter 826. The countless weapons in the lattice behind Silent Cry's back were like hidden dragons that had left the abyss. In other people's eyes, they rushed through the air and shot towards Maxwell in a manner that was incomparably boundless. One after another, the weapons from the gods completely covered Maxwell's position. The impact of the weapons caused explosions one after another. The ground was covered with smoke and dust from the explosions, and it was impossible to see what was going on inside. After a while, Wuming, who used his mental power to detect, found that Maxwell was no longer within the range of the energy torrent. Then Wu Ming raised his arm, and the Manchala formation stopped shooting weapons. Without the sound of these weapons being shot and exploding, the scene fell into silence. Not far away, Ling supported Her Highness as she watched this brutal scene with a face full of fear. Although Wu Ming's weapons were aimed at Maxwell, they were so powerful that even Her Highness and Ling were affected. She had no choice but to use her ability to teleport Her Highness not far away. Your Highness. Ling could not help but gulp as she spoke with a trembling voice. I know, Ling. This scene is too shocking for both you and me. Hundreds of thousands of God Park weapons with an ancient aura were fired at the same time. This was naturally very shocking for Ling. Even the gods and God King's God Park weapons could not compare to Wu Ming's. However, when she thought of his true identity, Ling understood. However, Her Highness was as shocked as Ling. As someone who had guessed Wu Ming's true identity, she was shocked by the Manchala formation that appeared behind Wu Ming. I didn't expect him to have the Manchala formation. Her Highness could not help but frown. Although it was different from the Manchala formation she knew, it was indeed the Manchala formation. After all, Her Highness and the Manchala formation were of the same origin. Then Her Highness' face hidden under the cloak smiled. As expected, it was right to meet you today, mysterious dragon. However, due to the distance, Wu Ming naturally couldn't hear His Highness' words, and the person Wu Ming was paying attention to was Maxwell. When the smoke dissipated, the exposed ground was riddled with holes. The traces of the explosion were quite obvious. Indeed, just as he had sensed with his spiritual power, Maxwell had disappeared without a trace. He didn't lose his mind because of anger. Wu Ming was not surprised by Maxwell's choice, or rather, it was not surprising to anyone. The Divine Blade of Salvation was a storage box that contained almost all the weapons used by the gods. Whether it was a reward for the last king for defeating the Godslayer, or a reward for helping the last king defeat the Godslayer. In short, the last king had been bestowed with various weapons by the gods over the years. According to what Shui Yu said, the Divine Blade of Salvation was a treasure trove that contained almost all of the treasures, and the treasures stored within were all genuine. This meant that not only could the Sword of Salvation project these weapons, it could also be used by Wu Ming. Maxwell had obviously sensed that these Godhead weapons were genuine, which was why he had run away after being killed. What a joke. It was obvious that he couldn't beat the other party, so why would he want to be tortured? It was better to run away first. As for His Highness and Ling, Wu Ming did not attack them, so who would care about them? After Wu Ming finished speaking, he waved his hand, and the Manchala square behind him disappeared one by one. Finally, it turned into a shining longsword that floated behind Wu Ming. It was the Divine Blade of Salvation. Then, Wu Ming looked at His Highness and Ling, who were not far away. I thought the two of you had run away too. I didn't expect you to still be here. With a grab, Wu Ming grabbed the Divine Blade of Salvation and aimed it at His Highness and Ling. It seems that I can catch the key person today. Ling, on the other hand, acted as if she was facing a formidable enemy. She stood in front of His Highness, and looked like she would immediately escape with His Highness if the situation was not right. However, His Highness did not panic at all. It was unknown if he was pretending to be calm, or if he was really confident. Sir Villo, I'll call you that for now. His Highness spoke. However, His Highness's words left Wu Ming scratching his head. What did this respectful tone mean? Also, what did he mean by for now? Did he know his true identity, or was there another, Villo Silenced, in the box garden world? But after thinking about it, Wu Ming understood. As expected, you've seen our true form. That's right, the truth was that His Highness had seen his true form. The evidence was what Maxwell said to Wu Ming when he first met Wu Ming. Even if you're only a soul now, you're not something that an existence like me can offend. Until next time, powerful dragon species. Without a doubt, the other party knew his identity. There was a high possibility that the other party had seen his true form. And His Highness, as Maxwell's companion on the surface and a key figure called Your Highness, it was impossible for him not to know. Hearing Wu Ming's words, His Highness could not help but clap his hands. As expected of you. But, I've never seen your true form. I've only felt your presence. As if recalling a memory, His Highness raised a hand. Just the presence alone is unforgettable. How powerful is that? Powerful enough to free me from the control of others. Enough to stop me from being a pawn. Your Highness. Ling looked at His Highness in confusion. Logically speaking, this should be their secret. Why did he reveal it so easily? Pressing on Ling's shoulder to signal Ling to calm down, His Highness then extended a hand to Wu Ming. Do you want to work with us? The scene fell into silence once again. Ling was stunned by His Highness' invitation to Wu Ming. His Highness maintained his extended hand, waiting for Wu Ming's answer. Wu Ming, on the other hand, didn't know what to say. He even smiled. Why do you think I'll agree? Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Because there is no conflict between us. Last time, when Ling and Galao attacked you, it was because they thought you were a member of Perseus. As for that guy Maxwell, you can see that he isn't actually on the same side as us. He was actually sent by the higher-ups to monitor me. His Highness was very sincere, and simply said some of the things that could be considered secrets. There's no conflict, and we have the same benefits. Under such circumstances, isn't working together the best choice? Indeed, not to mention that there was no conflict. Even if there was, so what? There was a saying that there were no eternal friends, only eternal benefits. But some things were just so coincidental. Compared to benefits, Wu Ming preferred friends. Unfortunately, I choose to decline. Chapter 827. What, don't you want to find your original body? Withdrawing his outstretched hand, His Highness walked toward Wu Ming step by step. I help you find your original body, and you use your power to help me get rid of my identity as a pawn. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Indeed, this is indeed a way to get the best of both worlds. Wu Ming shrugged and admitted generously. But I won't cooperate with people who use codenames every day. In this regard, His Highness smiled and then took off the hood of his cloak, revealing a rather young face of a white-haired boy. Your Highness, what are you doing? Ling was shocked. My name is Galji. Your Highness. Ling was really panicked this time. His Highness even said his real name. His Highness, or Galji. The reason why he has always used His Highness as a name is because the name Galji is too special. How special is it? At least, Wu Ming knew the origin of the other party as soon as he heard it. The 10th incarnation of the Hindu god Vishnu? Vishnu, one of the 3 main gods of Hinduism, the god of protection, is said to have more than 10 incarnations to save the world, but the most famous and recognized one is the 10 incarnations of Vishnu. And Galji is the 10th incarnation of Vishnu, the boy who appeared in the end of the world to save the world and rebuild the perfect era. Wu Ming never thought that Vishnu would be among the people who attacked the entire box. With such a special identity, it is difficult to guarantee that there is a Hindu mythological force behind Galji. But in this way, Wu Ming realized a problem. Did his original body also fall into the hands of the other party? If that is the case, it will be troublesome. How about it? I have enough sincerity. Don't you want to think about it? Galji once again proposed to Wu Ming. Indeed, just the exposure of the name Galji made Wu Ming think a lot, which is already very sincere. It's hard to imagine that as the 10th incarnation of the god of protection, Vishnu, you could actually attack Hakata. Wu Ming sighed. The north, south, east, west, and north districts were attacked by Absolute Evil's doppelganger. The south district's ruler, Avalon, was attacked as well as Pest's attack on the fire dragon's birth ceremony. Galji and the others were probably behind all of this. This included the fact that Salamandra's headquarters had been attacked. However, if you are a chess piece, it makes sense. Wu Ming looked at the capital of brilliant flames. At this moment, the city of raging flames was still being attacked by the giants. As the reinforcements had yet to arrive, Salamandra seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. If Wu Ming continued to chat with Galji, perhaps the entire Salamandra would follow in the footsteps of Avalon. Wu Ming stretched out a hand and began to chant. My contract, my kin, I am the place where the tributaries converge. Make a pact with me. Heed my call, obey my command. Appear. Wu Ming's sudden chant startled Ling. After using his ability to hastily teleport to Gaoji, who had taken a few steps forward, Ling was ready to teleport Gaoji away immediately. However, Gaoji once again pressed on Ling's shoulder, indicating that Ling did not need to panic. Don't worry, Ling. You won't suddenly attack me. Although this was the first time he and Wu Ming met, through the information collected in the past, Gaoji understood that Wu Ming was not the kind of person who would sneak up on a face-to-face conversation. Wu Ming was a powerhouse, and powerhouses did not need to do so. The truth was indeed as Gaoji said. Wu Ming would indeed not suddenly attack. The reason why Wu Ming chanted the chant was actually to deal with the enemies in the capital of brilliant flames. After Wu Ming finished chanting, a light appeared from Wu Ming's body. The light condensed and gradually solidified, finally forming a human figure. The light gradually dissipated, revealing a person who looked exactly like Wu Ming. This startled Ling, and His Royal Highness's eyes also became serious. Because not only did the other party look exactly the same as Wu Ming, but even the aura was exactly the same as Wu Ming's. It was very likely that the other party's strength was exactly the same as Wu Ming's. Indeed, the main function of the clone was to conclude contracts and summon kin, but the most important thing was that it could duplicate the original body. If multiple clones were duplicated, then each clone would have a fraction of the original body's strength. But if only one clone was duplicated, then the clone would have 100% of the original body's strength, which was equivalent to doubling. Of course, that was only duplicating one's own strength. For a unique weapon like the Blade of Salvation, the clone could not duplicate it. Wu Ming threw the Divine Blade of Salvation to his doppelganger. The doppelganger caught the Divine Blade of Salvation. After nodding his head, the doppelganger bent his legs and jumped up, flying towards the direction of Glorious Flame City. Then Wu Ming looked at Gaoji again. Speaking of which, we are somewhat similar. I also have a clone, and there are 12 of them. The ability just now was the effect of my 8th clone. You also have a clone. Gaoji was stunned. Having the same clone as Vishnu and the Manchala phalanx, Gaoji began to suspect whether Wu Ming was a dragon god in India. Although he was the 10th clone of Vishnu, he was only born less than 3 years ago, and the knowledge in his mind was only general knowledge that was instilled. It could be said that apart from having the title of Vishnu's 10th clone, he was completely unrelated to Vishnu, a newborn less than 3 years old. However, while Gaoji was guessing, Wu Ming explained, "That's the authority I obtained by killing gods in other worlds. The Blade of Salvation is the same. Is that so?" However, Gaoji's expression was somewhat unpleasant. The other party obviously wanted to use this information to offset the information he had given. To put it simply, Wu Ming still chose to refuse to cooperate. "I think my sincerity is enough. Do you have to be my enemy?" Everything Gaoji had done all this time was to get rid of the upper echelon's control, so that he and his subordinates could get rid of the status of chess pieces. If Wu Ming found his original body, Gaoji was confident that Wu Ming's power could help him achieve all this. However, Gaoji did not lack Wu Ming's power. Wu Ming's power was just a shortcut, and it did not matter even if he did not have it. If Wu Ming insisted on being an enemy, then Gaoji would definitely not be soft-hearted. For freedom, Gaoji was willing to attack the entire box court, let alone a ghost without a body. However, Wu Ming scoffed at this. "What, you're changing to coercion now?" "I still say the same thing, I refuse." There might be a chance to be gentle with Wu Ming, but if he were to be forceful with Wu Ming, there would be no chance at all. "No, how can that be? This is not coercion." His Highness, who had a bad expression, suddenly smiled. "If I remember correctly, no name should only be the box court knight now." Chapter 828. The Paladin Gaoji was referring to Letitia. "What do you mean?" Wu Ming raised his eyebrows. "If you insist on being my enemy, then I have no choice but to strike first." Gaoji shrugged helplessly. "Actually, other than the Western District, which is a feint, the Eastern, Southern, and Northern districts are all our targets." Gaoji's words shocked Wu Ming. "Could it be that the Eastern District was also attacked by you?" Gaoji revealed a natural smile. Not long after Silent Wonder left the East District, His companions went to attack the East District, or rather, they attacked No Name. And this was what Galji believed to be coercion. Boom! The sound of the ground breaking resounded. Wu Ming rushed towards Galji and unleashed a heavy punch. Boom! Galji's crossed arms blocked Wu Ming's fist, producing a muffled sound that shook the atmosphere. Your Highness! Belle was shocked. Just as she was about to use grace to go to His Highness' side, Wu Ming suddenly looked at her. Swish! Visible magical powers emanated from Wu Ming's body, instantly enveloping Ling and Galji. Galji himself wasn't affected by the suppressive version of magic, so he was immune to it, but Ling wasn't. Just like when Pest was summoned, Ling's face was pale and his body was stiff. At this moment, his mind was blank and he couldn't even use his grace. He even sat on the ground. Ring. Galji couldn't help but worry. Do you still have the time to worry about others? Wu Ming increased his strength again, and Galji's legs began to bend. As expected of a dragon. Not only is his strength vaguely superior to Elder GE's in his soul state, but even the pressure of his mana is so terrifying. Galji frowned slightly. He had to admit that he had underestimated the spirit in front of him. Wu Ming maintained his posture of punching Galji's arms. He stuck his head out slightly and looked at Galji. I came prepared this time when I returned to the paladin. Although Wu Ming was now a servant, which was also a spirit, the summoning spell that Letitia used when they returned to the paladin was modified by Wu Ming. As a result, all of Wu Ming's attributes were close to his original body. Wu Ming's original body had been in the origin for so long that he had been strengthened to a certain extent. It could be said that it was a piece of cake for him to receive a holy sword head-on without any damage. Even Gilgamesh's, which was the most powerful treasure artifact, could only scratch the scales of his original body. But even so, Wu Ming's origin dragon hadn't reached adulthood yet, and was only between infancy and adulthood. It was hard to imagine what kind of a being to be an adult dragon origin. If Wu Ming's original body continued to be baptized in the origin, it would not take long before Wu Ming's original body would enter adulthood. However, Wu Ming did not have the time to wait any longer because Gidea's anthropoid burn threatened Gadatsi's world. Therefore, Wu Ming chose to face Gidea directly. It could be said that if Gidea did not have the black mud that came from the same source as Wu Ming, he would not be a match for Wu Ming at all. Even with part of the black mud, Gidea would still lose to Wu Ming in the end. It was because of this that Wu Ming did not hesitate to cause trouble for Gidea. Gidea understood this as well, which was why he chose to attract almost all of the black mud between the worlds and detonate it to severely injure Wu Ming. It was also because of this that Wu Ming's original body fell into the box world, and was nowhere to be found. As for finding his original body in an unknown world, Wu Ming needed to continue cheating. When he returned to the box, Wu Ming had a rough idea of how difficult his enemy would be to deal with, be it in terms of strength, durability, or agility. As the master of cheating, Wu Ming adjusted the servant's spirit base to the limit of a servant. It could be understood that Wu Ming's casual punch just now was equivalent to the full-strength blow of someone with 5-digit strength. However, the fact that Galji could withstand the punch proved that he was not to be underestimated. Although Wu Ming's punch was a 5-digit attack, it did not mean that his opponent's 100-point physical defense could withstand his 100-point physical attack. Other external factors had to be considered. Therefore, the number of Galji who could withstand Wu Ming's punch was definitely not in the 5 digits. At the very least, it had to be in the 4 digits. Try this. After Wu Ming finished speaking, his red pupils turned golden. I am the strongest, and I hold all the victory in my hands. No matter if it is a human or a demon, I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. The sacred words came out from Wu Ming's mouth. Whether it was Galji or Ling, both of their faces changed. Galji felt a huge force coming from his arms. If he had to describe it, he would say that he could block it for a while longer, but now he couldn't block it for a while longer. Belle, on the other hand, came back to her senses when she heard Wu Ming's familiar words. It was a word that could summon a golden giant that could instantly suppress Galao. His Royal Highness must be in danger. Although she did not see the golden giant, Ling knew that Galji was still in danger. Your Royal Highness. Ling struggled to get up while shouting for Galji. Then, Ling used her grace to come to Galji's side and prepared to transfer him away. But at this moment Wu Ming smiled. Ling, back off. Galji yelled at Ling. However, before Ling could react, a rune that had been inscribed on the ground lit up and enveloped her. Ah! Ling screamed and fainted on the ground. That's a lune. That's right. The runes on the ground were the lune runes that Wu Ming had drawn with his mental strength. As a rather famous rune, even though Galji wasn't proficient in it, he could at least recognize it. As expected, you guys are easier to deal with than Maxwell. After all, Maxwell couldn't be killed. Wu Ming finished his sentence and pushed Galji away with his arm that was filled with the divine strength of his giant form. Galji was pushed back more than 10 meters, and Silent Sound's huge force even caused Galji's feet to leave 2 trenches in the ground. Damn it! Galji lowered his arm with a look of indignation. In terms of physical fitness, he couldn't compare to Wu Ming. His other abilities were basically useless against Wu Ming. Only his trump card might be effective against Wu Ming, but because of Wu Ming's sudden attack, Galji didn't have time to use it. And now, although Galji had pulled away from Wu Ming and could use his trump card, but now isn't it time for me to threaten you, Your Highness Galji? Wu Ming's sarcastic tone entered Galji's ears. A golden giant appeared behind Wu Ming, and in the giant's hand was the unconscious Ling. Let me tell you another piece of information. Don't get close to me easily. You'll be at a disadvantage. Of course, that's if you have the chance in the future. Galji dared to threaten Wu Ming with no name as companions, and Wu Ming dared to fight to the death with Galji. Literally, you die, I live. Chapter 829. Galji admitted that he guessed wrong. It wasn't that he guessed wrong that Wu Ming wouldn't attack him, but that he guessed wrong about Wu Ming's strength. When he threatened Wu Ming with no name, Galji was prepared to fight with Wu Ming. Reality proved that what he heard was false, and what he saw was true. Perhaps it was because everything had been smooth sailing all this time, which made Galji a little careless. The strength that Wu Ming displayed was completely beyond his imagination. This time, Galji was defeated. Sir Villo, how about we each take a step back? I'll let my subordinates retreat from no name, and not touch anyone or anything in no name, and you sound the bell and let us leave. After all, everyone had the other party's weakness in their hands, and they couldn't fight to the death. Taking a step back was the best solution at the moment. However, this best solution was based on the fact that no name was successfully attacked by Galji's subordinates. You think too much, Your Highness Galji. Are you sure your subordinates have completed the mission you gave them? What do you mean? Galji's expression changed slightly. You can try to contact your subordinates and see how they're doing with their mission. However, Galji couldn't do the super long-distance communication from the Eastern District to the Northern District, from 7 digits to 5 digits. Perhaps only Wu Ming had such a method. He guessed that Galji couldn't do it, so Wu Ming raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Black and purple ripples appeared, and the giant behind Wu Ming reached its free hand into it, and then stretched it out. However, when it stretched out, the originally empty golden giant hand had a dying figure in a black robe. It looked like a woman. Aurora? Galji's expression changed when he saw this. It was the subordinate he sent to no name. Sorry, Your Highness, we miscalculated. After Aurora finished speaking, she fainted. When Letitia signed the contract with me, although her current strength is still very vague, it shouldn't be lower than 4 digits. In fact, it's even higher than before. I'm afraid you guys don't know about this. After all, ever since Letitia became Wu Ming's maid, she had been with Wu Ming almost all the time. She had only helped a little during the fire dragon's birth ceremony. But because she didn't use her full strength, Galji and the others still believed that Letitia had lost her quintessence. Therefore, Galji only sent Aurora alone to no name, to deal with Letitia, who had lost her divinity. As a result, Aurora was taken down by Letitia, who had obtained a new power. After that, Letitia contacted Wu Ming through the dependent contract, letting Wu Ming know that the enemy had been taken down. If you let this guy bring some of Absolute Evil's doppelgangers with him, I'm afraid Letitia will have to put in more effort. She might even be able to take the opportunity to escape. The golden giant behind Wu Ming shook the arm that was grabbing Aurora, which was rather ironic in Galji's eyes. Galji fell silent. He only had a few subordinates, and they were considered his confidants. It was impossible for him to give them up so easily like pest. At this moment, a huge dragon flew out from the capital of raging flames. "Your Highness!" The huge dragon roared. Whoosh! The huge dragon's descent caused the airflow to flow like a storm, blowing the surroundings. Then, the emblem engraved on the huge dragon's body suddenly lit up. In an instant, the huge dragon transformed into a griffin. Wu Ming recognized the griffin at a glance. It was the griffin he had captured with Ling last time, the one named Glea Grove. So it's genome tree, huh? At this moment, the emblem on Glea's body was extremely similar to the emblem on the wooden carving hanging around Hiroyuki's neck. There was no doubt that it was the genome tree. Perhaps the ability to transform into a huge dragon was the ability bestowed to Glea by the genome tree. "Elder Galji, are you hurt?" Wu Ming's clone had headed to the capital of raging flames with the weapon known as the Divine Blade of Salvation. Galji was rather worried that Glea Grove, who was left behind to assist the giant demon king in attacking Salamandra, would be injured by Wu Ming's clone. "I'm fine, Your Highness." Glea's griffin head shook, then turned to Wu Ming. "After that guy went over, I immediately retreated from the capital of raging flames." He knew how powerful Wu Ming was. His godly speed that seemed to be able to control time, and his immense strength that even he couldn't compare to. Just these two abilities alone were already troublesome for Glea. Moreover, Glea was worried that since Wu Ming could spare time to support the capital of raging flames, would Galji and the others be in danger? Therefore, he left the capital of raging flames and flew over. It seems that it's a clone. After arriving here, he saw that Wu Ming was still here. Glea understood that the one who went to the capital of raging flames to support the capital of raging flames should be a clone created by Wu Ming with a special gift. Although it's a doppelganger, the doppelganger has the same strength as me, Wu Ming explained kindly, although this explanation was rather sarcastic in Glea's eyes. "Your Highness, what should we do next?" Glea lowered his head and asked Galji beside him. He naturally saw that Belle and Aurora, who was here for some reason, had fallen into the hands of the other party. Coupled with Maxwell's disappearance, their current situation was very grim. However, as long as Galji was here, it would be fine even if they were all sacrificed. Therefore, Glea was actually asking if they should retreat. Indeed, just as Glea thought, as long as Galji was still here, there was still hope because they had all gathered here for Galji. If Belle and Aurora were still awake, they would probably ask Glea to leave with Galji immediately. However, it was impossible for Galji to leave just like that. If he left just like that, he wouldn't be him anymore. Moreover, it was still uncertain whether the other party would let him go or not. According to the intelligence, Wu Ming had the ability to increase his speed to the point that it was as if he had paused time. Glea alone couldn't take Galji away. It would be fine if Maxwell was still here, but it was obvious that he couldn't rely on that guy now. "How about I use that to give it a shot?" Galji's eyes flickered. Just as Galji was in a dilemma, Wu Ming made a suggestion. "I say, Galji, do you want to make a deal with me?" "Deal?" Galji frowned. "Of course, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. Didn't you mean that before?" The golden giant behind Wu Ming stretched out his arms and showed the unconscious Belle and Aurora to Galji. "If it's you, you should have a lot of good things, especially the good things from No Name. For example, the flag of No Name." Chapter 830. But Galji shook his head helplessly. "Unfortunately, I was born less than 3 years ago, so I can't take out most of the things from No Name. Because No Name was attacked 3 years ago, Galji wasn't even born yet. Less than 3 years. Wu Ming was surprised. "I see. That's why you said you're a prop." Although Galji looked about the same age as Ren, he was only created as a prop with less than 3 years of life. "I was born with the body of a child, and the knowledge in my head is all man-made common sense. That's why I yearn for freedom so much." When Galji spoke, his eyes were full of hope for freedom. That's not an excuse for you to destroy other people's lives, Wuming suddenly said. After a long sigh, Wuming closed his eyes and looked at Galji again. Although I'm not human, I grew up as a human. It wasn't until the old man who adopted me passed away that I knew I wasn't human. Grew up as a human? Galji was also stunned. That's right. The old man who adopted me deliberately hid it. Although he knew I couldn't live like a human for the rest of my life, he still hoped I could live a normal life for a while. As if recalling his life on Earth in another world, Wuming's eyes were full of memories. That old man was very ordinary. He even believed in science before he found me. As if recalling the director who adopted him, Wuming showed a warm smile. Galji, we're very similar. We're all people who like to do whatever we want for important things. Galji didn't say anything and just listened quietly. Although I'm not human, the old man taught me how to be a human. As Wuming spoke, the majesty in his golden eyes that were already full of divinity increased by another level. You worked hard to resist the fate that others imposed on you for freedom. That's not wrong, but you shouldn't impose the same tragic fate on others, because if you do, you'll become someone you hate. In the end, he concluded solemnly. You have strength no less than 4 digits, companions who trust you, and the name of Galji, the 10th incarnation of Vishnu who saves the world. Even if it's not for others, just for your own name, don't let it down. Galji didn't say anything. It was impossible for him to be affected by Wuming's words. Although it wasn't as long as Shiro Amakusa's 60 years of waiting, Galji had still worked hard for 3 years. How could he be so easily swayed by a few words? However, it was impossible to say that it had no effect at all. The last sentence, in particular, left a deep impression on Galji. Don't disappoint, huh? Galji fell silent. No one had ever said such a thing to him, including Glaya, who was beside him now. At this moment, Glaya looked at Wuming rather approvingly. To be honest, if not for the fact that his master, Galji, and Wuming were on different sides, they might have become friends. Although Galji fell into deep thought, Wuming wouldn't just wait for him. Alright, tell me what you have. If I'm satisfied, I'll let them go. Wuming's tone also calmed down, as if it had nothing to do with him. The reason why he told Galji all this was because he felt that it was a waste for a special young man like Galji, who was born less than 3 years ago, to put his energy into extreme freedom. If he restrained himself in the future, it would be fine. Everyone would mind their own business and go their own ways. After all, the two of them had just met. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were strangers. Wuming didn't want to ask what Galji would choose. However, no matter what, he had to tear off 2 pieces of meat from him before letting him go. At the very least, he had to teach him a lesson and let Galji know that No Name wasn't so easy to touch. Although most of the things in No Name aren't with me, I still have a few. Galji reacted. Right now, it was better to complete this deal and leave as soon as possible. Then Galji said something that surprised Wuming and made him happy. Your community, the former flag of No Name. Blazing Flame City, Salamandra's headquarters. The surroundings were a mess. A large number of houses had collapsed, and there were a large number of giant corpses in the ruins. There were still many places in the entire Blazing Flame City that were still burning. A group of Salamandra members were busy putting out the fire, cleaning up, and looking for survivors. In the office of the leader of Salamandra, Shadora Telderek, who had finished signing the temporary documents at hand, sighed tiredly. It's finally done. She put the documents aside for the time being and leaned back on the chair. Knock knock. At this time there was a knock on the door. Hearing the knock on the door, Shadora immediately sat up straight, showing a very dignified look. Please come in. Pushing the door open was Shadora's brother, Mandela Telderek. What, so it's brother? Shadora breathed a sigh of relief again. Shadora, you can't slack off. Mandela walked to the desk and put a new batch of documents on the table. More documents? Shadora had to deal with these temporary documents again. It couldn't be helped. Blazing Flame City was basically in chaos because of the Demon King's attack. Although it was now solved, there were still many problems left. Salamandra, as the local snake of Blazing Flame City, had to shoulder this responsibility. And this fell on the leader of Salamandra, Shadora. There's really no other way. I'll help too, but in the end you still have to approve it. Mandela pretended to be serious and said, after all, Shadora was the leader of Salamandra, not Mandela. Yes, you've helped a lot, brother. Although Mandela looked very arrogant, Shadora still knew her brother. Mandela was the type of person who had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Beside Shadora's desk, Mandela took some documents and sat down at the small table for visitors. Shadora approved the documents while chatting with Mandela. It's all thanks to Servillo's timely arrival that the casualties were reduced. Shadora couldn't do anything to the Demon King for a while. It was Wu Ming's clone who came and defeated the Demon King with the Divine Blade of Salvation. As soon as the Demon King was defeated, the other giants also panicked and were all killed by Salamandra. Mandela didn't have much of a good impression of Wu Ming, so he just softly agreed. However, he had to admit that this time it was really thanks to Wu Ming's powerful support. Oh right, according to the information from the guards, a golden half-body energy giant appeared near the west gate of Blazing Flame City, but it has disappeared now. Sigh, is it a new enemy? Shadora was shocked. I don't know the details, but he has already rushed over. Mandela shook his head. This he naturally referred to Wu Ming. It's already solved. Suddenly a voice came from outside the window. Chapter 831. As soon as he said that, Wu Ming jumped in through the window. Servillo. Shadora was shocked. Please use the front door in the future, Mandela said sternly, but Wu Ming didn't listen at all. The one who came to support you was my clone. The real me encountered an enemy outside the city. Wu Ming sat down next to Mandela and began to explain. So that means that golden giant was a gift from Servillo? That's amazing. Shadora's small eyes blinked. After all, this kind of summoning ability from a giant was very rare. However, Mandela didn't care about this. What he cared about was that the one who came to support was a clone. Even a clone was this strong. By the way, Servillo, did you destroy the enemy? Shadora asked with concern. Wu Ming shook his head. They had the gift of teleportation, so they ran away. Of course, this was a lie. Even if he was an ally of Salamandra, Wu Ming wouldn't tell them that he let Galji and the others go after the deal. First of all, with Mandela's personality, he would definitely criticize Wu Ming's behavior again. Although Wu Ming didn't care about Mandela's words, it would save him some trouble. Secondly, in a sense he was cooperating with Galji and the others. If this spread out, it would have a slight impact on No Name. Is that so? Indeed, if it was the gift of teleportation, then it would be troublesome. Shadora nodded as if she understood. Although Shadora was a little disappointed that she didn't catch them. After all, even if those people weren't the mastermind behind the attack on Flame Capital, they definitely had something to do with this attack. As the leader of Salamandra, Shadora loved her people like her own children from the bottom of her heart. Flame Capital suffered such a disaster, and because Shadora didn't protect the people well, she naturally became hostile to the enemies who caused all this. However, compared to hostility, Shadora blamed herself more. Wu Ming saw a trace of self-blame in Shadora's eyes, so he comforted her. The enemy is not an ordinary person. He has an even greater power behind him. It's understandable that Salamandra is unable to stop him. This was also the reason why Wu Ming had let Galji and the others go. If they killed Galji and the others, the people behind him would definitely send new people to cause trouble. In that case, it would be better to leave Galji alive. After all, Wu Ming had a good understanding of the other party. It would be easier to deal with him the next time they met. Lord Villo, you don't have to comfort me. Our Salamandra is indeed lacking in many aspects. As the leader, I cannot absolve myself from the blame. After all, Salamandra was a community that relied on numbers. They didn't have any high-level combatants. In addition, after the death of the previous leader, Shadora, who had succeeded the position, was too young. Salamandra had been in the 5 digits for a while now, and they were almost unable to hold on. If it wasn't for the smooth hosting of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, and the news of Shadora's victory against the Demon King, which greatly increased the reputation of Salamandra, Salamandra would have been transferred to the 6 Digits outer sect. However, it was different from Luoz's intention of transferring Perseus to the 6 Digits. Luoz took the initiative to transfer Perseus to the 6 Digits so that he could spend the rest of his life eating and drinking. Perseus originally had a strong foundation. If Luoz worked a little harder, no matter how bad his talent was, he would still be qualified to stay in the 5 Digits. In the end, because of Luoz's squandering, Perseus lost the ability to stay in the 5 Digits. In the end, because of Luoz's lack of foresight, Perseus was disbanded. As for Luoz, it was unknown whether Luoz was dead or alive. Shadora, on the other hand, had no choice but to move her Salamandra to 6 Digits. In the end, because of Shadora's tireless efforts, Salamandra was able to maintain the 5 Digits. Shadora's position as the leader of the hierarchy was also gradually accepted by the people. Don't be depressed, Shadora. When you grow up, our Salamandra will definitely welcome the peak again. Mandela said, his eyes filled with hope for the future. Yes, brother, I will definitely work hard. Shadora also encouraged herself. She couldn't be depressed just because of this. At this time, Wuming also spoke. I heard that the reason why Shadora took over the position of leader is because her bloodline is denser. I don't know if it's true. This was something that Wuming had heard by accident. The reason why Mandela didn't take over the position of leader, but rather the younger Shadora, was because Shadora's bloodline was much denser than Mandela's. That's right. Our ancestor is the Star Sea Dragon King. Shadora has a bloodline power comparable to the Star Sea Dragon King. When she grew up in the future, this bloodline power would become Shadora's backing, allowing her to fully qualify to be the leader of the hierarchy. It would also allow Salamandra to gain a foothold. This was also why no one publicly objected to the young Shadora taking over the position of leader of the hierarchy. They only privately stirred up trouble. One shouldn't bully the young for being poor. After thinking for a while, Wuming spoke. If I find my body again, I can help you. Shadora and Mandela were taken aback. They didn't quite understand what Wuming meant. My body is also a dragon. I don't think I'm any weaker than the Star Sea Dragon King. My blood should be able to strengthen Shadora's bloodline power and make her stronger. Putting aside the fact that Thousand Yes and No Name were allies, just based on Shadora's personal attitude towards No Name, Wuming wouldn't be stingy. So Servillo is also a dragon? Then this must be fate? Shadora stood up excitedly. All the dragons under the heavens were one family, and Wuming was their ally, Salamandra. In addition, Shadora had always had a good impression of Wuming, and now it could be said that they were even closer than before. Ahem. Mandela coughed and motioned for Shadora to calm down. Let's talk about it in the future. Shadora doesn't need a sudden surge of power. She needs to work hard step by step. To be honest, Mandela admitted that Wuming was strong. However, he didn't think that Wuming was weaker than the Star Sea Dragon King. Anyone would give empty promises. In the end, it was still a matter of fact. Wuming, who understood Mandela's meaning, only smiled casually and didn't say anything. It's about time for me to go back, Wuming said as he stood up. Are you leaving already, Servillo? We haven't thanked you for coming to help us. Shadora wanted to ask Wuming to stay. At least a simple meal was good enough. No, I still have to go pick up Vera. Wuming walked to the window as he spoke. Speaking of which, is there anything important in Salamandra? Wuming's sudden question stunned Shadora. Something important. We don't have anything important here. Servillo, I wish you a safe journey. Mandela suddenly interrupted. After looking at Mandela for a few seconds, Wuming nodded. Okay, I got it. Then Wuming jumped out of the window. At the same time, Wuming heard frantic voices behind him. Please remember to use the front door in the future. Chapter 832. Between the 399-9999 outer gate and the 4000000 outer gate, where the fire dragon's birth ceremony was held, and where Absolute Evil's clone had attacked not long ago. On the clock tower that Wuming had repaired in the past, Vera sat alone on the edge of the clock tower, looking at the town that had yet to be repaired due to the attack of Absolute Evil's clone. As the wind blew, Vera's huge but harmonious twin ponytails swayed gently. Vera, who was already unusually beautiful, was even more moving in the silence at this moment. If Maxwell were here, he would probably go crazy with excitement. However, even if it were someone else, if they saw this scene now, they would also be stunned by Vera. For example, Wuming, who came to pick up Vera now. As soon as Wuming walked out of the teleportation gate, he saw such a picturesque scene. Looking at this scene, coupled with the cool breeze on the clock tower, Wuming's last trace of dissatisfaction for not being able to catch Maxwell disappeared. Why was it the last trace? Because most of his dissatisfaction disappeared because of the deal with Galgi. Seeing Wuming's arrival, Vera, who was sitting on the edge of the clock tower, immediately got up and jogged to Wuming's side, grabbing his sleeve again. "Are you hurt?" The fairy-like voice once again entered Wuming's ears, bringing great pleasure to Wuming's mind. "Of course I'm not hurt. The only person who can hurt me is probably myself." Wuming hadn't been hurt for a long time, except for the time when he fought with Gidia. Only the black mud of the same origin could cause serious damage to Wuming. The other damage to Wuming was negligible. Vera nodded and continued to ask, "Is it done?" Without a doubt, Vera was asking about Maxwell. "He ran away. I don't know about that guy's resurrection ability, so I can't kill him now." Wuming shook his head. Vera was surprised. After all, every time she met Maxwell, she could only run because no matter how she attacked and killed Maxwell, that guy just wouldn't leave. He had an "I'm not afraid of you" look on his face. And Wuming was able to chase Maxwell away, which made Vera look at him in a new light. However, Maxwell was only so obsessed with Vera. When you love a person, no matter what she did, you would think it was her love for you. For example, Vera kept killing Maxwell, and in Maxwell's eyes, it was Vera's love for him. One had to admit that Maxwell was a freak. However, Maxwell wasn't a masochist in the face of Silent Cry's constant attacks. Since he couldn't beat him, he would just leave. Reality was that reality. However, immediately after that, Vera felt a little uneasy to kill Maxwell. As if she could see that Maxwell would continue to tail her in the future, Vera's grip on Wuming's sleeve tightened. "It's okay, Vera. Next time, I will take care of him." Wuming's eyes flickered. She didn't know if he thought of a solution. Vera was puzzled. Why did Wuming say can't kill him, and then say, "I will take care of him"? Although they had only known each other for a short time, Vera had a good impression of Wuming. He wasn't an arrogant person. Wuming patted Vera, who tilted her head in confusion, and kept her in suspense. "You don't have to kill Maxwell to take care of him. Trust me, don't think about Maxwell for now." Vera nodded. Just like Wuming said, she just needed to trust him. Next, there was the problem of Vera's whereabouts. "I'm going back to No Name. Do you want me to send you back to the outer door of Willow's Wisp?" Wuming asked. But Vera shook her head. Wuming was stunned for a moment before he reacted. "I'm the one who thinks too highly of myself." Vera could control the realm door. When he went to the outer door of 54545, it was Vera who took him there. Therefore, it was easy for Vera to go home by herself. And Wuming had never been to the outer door of Willow's Wisp, so he couldn't send her back. "Then you can go back by yourself. I'll go first." Wuming opened the teleportation door, and was about to walk in. He had to hurry back to No Name and give Laetitia and the others a surprise. But Wuming realized that Vera, who was pulling on his sleeve, didn't have any intention of letting go. "Let's go together," Vera said calmly. They were both ghosts, and had the same teleportation door ability. Moreover, Wuming was willing to help her deal with Maxwell. Vera liked this kindred spirit very much. Therefore, Vera felt that following Wuming would be better. Anyway, she was wandering around the North District by herself. If she didn't follow Wuming, would she have to wander around by herself, and be followed by Maxwell again? But this made Wuming helpless. "You are the leader of Willow's Wisp. Is it okay for you to wander outside for a long time?" Ifrin wandered outside for a long time. not to mention the other members of No Name. Even Ren himself wouldn't forgive himself. No, it shouldn't be said like that. It should be said that Ren wouldn't do such a thing. However, it was Vera who nodded her head. After all, her Willow's Wisp was a big business, and the people of Willow's Wisp were used to Vera slacking off daily. Thus, Vera expressed that there was no problem. In any case, Wuming once again understood why Vera wasn't the leader of the hierarchy. Then let's go back together. Following Vera's nod, the two entered the teleportation door. 210-5380 Outer Gate, No Name's headquarters. In the room that belonged to Wuming, a dark purple ripple appeared. Wuming and Vera walked out. You're back. Wuming let out a long breath. This trip to the North District was really tiring. But in the end it was still a fruitful trip. Is this considered a Villow's home? Vera suddenly asked. This question made Wuming fall into deep thought. Logically speaking, the Great Root should be Wuming's home. However, although the Great Root was the home that Wuming had always been pursuing, Wuming didn't really want to stay there forever. It was fine if Wuming didn't cherish it after he got it. In any case, Wuming liked to interact with people. That kind of life was a good life for Wuming, and he didn't want to quietly sleep alone in the Great Root. How do I put it? This place is like home, but it's not home. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a place to rest, because I won't stay in this place forever. Wuming replied. Although Wuming didn't like to stay in the Great Root, but Wuming only had one home, and that was the Great Root. But the definition of home is different for everyone. In my opinion, it's not a place where people gather that is called home, but a place where there are people who are worthy of being entrusted with. That place can be called home, and the current No Name, to me, is such an existence. Although Wuming didn't join No Name for long, and he left not long after, feelings were hard to define. Wuming, 16th Night, Black Rabbit, and the others got along very well, and they were very much to his taste. Moreover, they were sincere to Wuming, so there was no reason for Wuming not to treat them with sincerity. And because of this, the home of No Name was formed. And this conflicted with the former, which was why Wuming said that it was like home, but it wasn't. In short, whether it's a home or not, just enjoy the life in front of you. If you think too much, it'll be very hard. Vera nodded thoughtfully. Let's go, Vera. Let's go out. I've prepared a surprise for my companions, Wuming said as he pulled Vera towards the door. I wonder if 16th Night and the others are back. With that in mind, Wuming pushed open the door. Chapter 833. Kacha. Opening the door, he was greeted by a petite figure. Wah. Letitia, who didn't expect the door to open by itself, bumped into Wuming and let out a whimper. Master, you're back. Letitia took 2 steps back, shook her head, and asked in embarrassment. Sorry, Letitia, I just came back. I didn't expect to see you at the door. Shaking her head, Letitia smiled. I just wanted to clean the room for Master. As she said this, Letitia also noticed that there was an extra person behind Wuming. Master Vera? Then, Letitia recovered from her shock. Although I can almost guess what the reason is. It should be Maxwell's doing. As Letitia said this, she looked at Wuming with some jealousy. Letitia was clearly the one who was following Wuming around. Ahem. Speaking of which, Letitia, is everyone not back yet? Although it was better to let 16 Knights and the others stay in the Southern District, it was not the territory of No Name. Although it was safe to have 16 Knights and the others, it was not good to take the initiative. How could the safety of the Southern District be left to the people of the Eastern District? Whether it was the Southern District or the Eastern District, it would have a huge impact. Wuming didn't think that the smart guy 16 Knights wouldn't have thought of this. But Letitia shook her head. Not yet, but I think they should be on their way. Letitia was also a very smart person. What Wuming and 16 Knights understood, Letitia naturally understood as well. If that's the case, I'll wait for everyone to come back before I take out the surprise I prepared. Wuming smiled mysteriously, took Vera around Letitia, and left the room. Surprise? Letitia tilted her head, puzzled. In the end, Letitia shrugged and walked into Wu Ming's room. After all, cleaning had to be done. In the corridor, Wu Ming dragged Vera, who didn't know what was going on, and strolled along. Although I want to show you around No Name, I'm going to find White Yiksha. Are you going to follow me or stay in No Name to rest, Vera? Wu Ming said to Vera without looking back. Vera didn't say anything. She could do whatever she wanted. Vera, it's better for you to stay in No Name. I'm only going to White Yiksha to give him some information. I'll be back soon and it's very safe here. Maxwell won't come. There's no need for him to keep following me. Vera nodded and replied softly, Mem. However, he had to find someone to keep an eye on Vera. He couldn't let Vera stay in a room alone and wait for Wu Ming to come back. Should I go back and look for Letitia? However, just as Wu Ming was thinking, Lily suddenly walked out from the corner in front of him. Sir Villo, are you back? Then Lily noticed Vera, who was pulling on Wu Ming's sleeve and hiding behind Wu Ming. What a cute child. Sir Villo, who is she? Lily looked at Vera curiously. She seemed to be very interested in Vera. Because she had never seen Vera before, and Lily wasn't familiar with the leader of Willow's North District, Vera Ja Ignufost, Lily didn't think that the charming and cute little girl behind Wu Ming was such a big shot. Instead, Wu Ming's eyes lit up and he nodded. This is Vera. I met her in the North District. Vera, what a cute name. Lily jogged to Vera's side and held her hand. I'm Lily. I can call you Vera. Vera tilted her head and looked at the little fox girl Lily. She didn't say anything, but her eyes kept wandering between Lily and her chest. This made Lily's expression gradually freeze. From the looks of it, Vera and Lily were about the same age. It was just that her chest developed a little too quickly. Because Vera was behind Wu Ming, Lily didn't notice it at first. Lily smiled a little awkwardly and kept numbing herself in her heart. It's just that I developed slowly. I'm going to White Yiksha's place. Can I ask Lily for a favor? Lily was taken aback, but then she nodded. Of course, Lily just happened to have some free time. What is it? Wu Ming smiled and pointed at Vera. Help me look after Vera, how about it? Lily naturally had no objections. Of course, I'll get along well with Vera. Looking at Lily's smile, Wu Ming felt that it was the right thing to do not tell Lily about Vera's identity. That's it, I'll leave it to you. Opening the portal, Wu Ming looked at Vera again. Get along well with Lily, don't bully her. Wu Ming saw the scene of Vera showing off her chest to Lily before. It made sense that natural airheads were all black when cut open. Vera nodded obediently. Then I'm leaving. She plunged into the black and purple ripples of the portal. Have a safe trip, Lily responded enthusiastically. Okay Vera, this is your first time in our community. I'll show you around. After Vera nodded silently, Lily took Vera's hand and walked around. And Vera quietly took out a hammer from behind where Lily couldn't see. 210-5380 Outer Gate. 1000 Yes Branch. In the room where White Yiksha often stayed, the black and purple ripples appeared and Wu Ming jumped out. No one. Standing up, Wu Ming looked around in confusion. Usually White Yiksha would sit here and drink tea, eat snacks and rest. But with the current situation, it was understandable that White Yiksha didn't have time to be so leisurely. But at this moment, the door was pushed open. Katja, a white-haired loli walked in. It was White Yiksha. Oh, you're back. White Yiksha wasn't surprised by Wu Ming's arrival. She closed the door, calmly walked to her usual seat, found a cushion and sat down. Wu Ming sat down as well. I found a new clue. Then, Wu Ming told her the information about Galji and the others, as well as his own speculations, in an extremely indirect manner. Galji, huh? A hint of hatred appeared in White Yiksha's eyes. It wasn't hatred for Galji, but hatred for the people behind Galji. I didn't have a good impression of that bunch of stubborn people from the beginning. I just didn't expect them to attack boxing. What White Yiksha was talking about was naturally the unknown faction behind Galji. Although she didn't know who it was, White Yiksha was sure that it was one or more of the upper levels of the boxers. As White Yiksha spoke, she could not help but release an invisible pressure. Wu Ming could naturally sense White Yiksha's anger, so he didn't say anything else. After a while, the pressure disappeared, and White Yiksha calmed down. What should we do next? Wu Ming asked casually. As a senior of the boxers, White Yiksha naturally had more right to speak than Wu Ming. White Yiksha wasn't in a hurry to answer this question. Instead, she asked Wu Ming, "What do you think? Deal with it as it comes." Chapter 834. Wu Ming said without hesitation. The enemy's true goal was completely unknown. Although Wu Ming wanted Galji to reveal some information during the deal, Galji expressed that it might disrupt his plan to pursue freedom, so he rejected it. Wu Ming, who did not have enough bargaining chips, could only give up and simply carry out some transactions. I guess that's the only way. White Yiksha sighed helplessly. The box court was an incomparably mysterious world. Naturally, the other party's goal was even more difficult to guess because of this mysterious world. Not to mention that the box court's own people were playing tricks behind the scenes. At that moment, Wu Ming closed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. White Yiksha was not idle either. He took out his gift card and took out 2 teacups and a teapot. The teapot automatically poured tea into the teacups. I say, White Yiksha, how many are there in the human final trial? Wu Ming opened his eyes and suddenly asked. White Yiksha picked up one of the teacups and took a sip. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Wu Ming. Oh, you want to start with Galji himself? White Yiksha immediately understood what Wu Ming meant. Of course. Wu Ming shrugged, picked up a teacup, and took a sip as well. Then he put it to his right. Galji is a tool that was born less than 3 years ago. In this box court world that values inheritance, other than Galji's own nature, I can't think of any other place that would need this useless tool to play a role. Just like other stories and myths, there were many heroes like Galji. However, there was only one nature. Galji could not be said to be the best, but it was also extremely rare. The nature that Wu Ming mentioned referred to Galji's nature of coming to save the world at the end of the world. The end of the world for humans is probably referring to the human final trial, last embryo. The box court world was greatly influenced by the so-called inheritance. Like a law, if humans were unable to pass, defeat, the final trial, then humans themselves would walk towards destruction. And didn't the final trial of mankind require a savior type, hero like Galji to appear and save defeat the apocalypse of mankind? Only Galji, who had such an inheritance, could perform the magnificent feat of saving the world. Humans and gods are inseparable from humans, Wu Ming said, thinking of his experience in Mesopotamia. In order to connect the gods and humans, the gods created the wedge of heaven and the lock of heaven in an attempt to bind the gods and humans together. Would the gods of Box Court need to do the same? No, there was no need for that. Box Court was a world where mystery existed, or rather, it was a world created for the sake of allowing mystery to exist. Also, if one had to say something, the gods and humans of the Box Court had already been separated. After the gods came to the Box Court, the separation of the gods and humans was completed. With the development of time, humans advocated science and abandoned mystery. However, as long as humans were still around, the gods would at most weaken. In any case, they would not completely disappear. Therefore, the gods of Box Court did not need to spend so much effort to connect the gods and humans like the gods of Mesopotamia. Wu Ming's gods are inseparable from humans had another meaning. The separation of the gods and humans was inevitable, but the two existed in different worlds. As long as humans were still around, the gods would be fine. However, if humans were to go extinct, it would be a serious blow to the gods. Could it be that some gods want to save humans through Galji and pass the human final trial, last embryo, to finally achieve the goal of saving themselves? However, if outsiders were to hear this, they would definitely think that this idea was ridiculous. Because almost no gods would do that. White Yiksha shook his head. You also said almost, right? Wu Ming smiled. If it was not absolutely, then it was a possibility. White Yiksha was speechless. He could only bury his head and drink his tea. However, he also indirectly agreed with Wu Ming's words. After all, The gods are not without desires. White Yiksha raised his head and said calmly, if humans were to go extinct, then they who had eternal life would not live for long. Since that was the case, there would always be gods who would start preparing for a rainy day. However, I still say the same thing. Almost no gods would do that. This was just like the organizers of the lucky draw who had already decided on the winner. It did not conform to the rules. But not everyone has to eat with their right hand, right? There were always exceptions. The so-called rules were used to restrict the weak. Artificially liberate the human final trial, last embryo, and let their own pawns cross it to save their own lives. Wu Ming raised his hands as if he was weighing a scale. Then he continued, it's fine even if you fail. Give up everything you can. As long as you're still alive, there will always be a chance to solve it. As Wu Ming spoke, he slammed his right hand down as if it was a part that needed to be abandoned. However, they never thought about how disastrous the consequences of failure would be for others. Coincidentally, the hand that fell hit the teacup that Wu Ming had placed to his right. The teacup tilted and collapsed, spilling tea all over the floor. I'm not targeting anyone. I don't have a good impression of most gods. I can imagine how bad they are. After all, Wu Ming was on the side of humans. Be careful. White Yiksha looked at the floor. She was quite dissatisfied with Wu Ming's tea spilling. Speaking of which, what is your brain made of? You can actually make such a connection. To be honest, White Yiksha increasingly felt that Wu Ming's words made sense. Galji's existence itself is a very big point of suspicion. If there really was another purpose, then why did they deliberately let a prop that had been born less than 3 years ago do it? This was obviously a problem. They had to send an experienced person to do it. This meant that this matter had to be done by Galji. However, Galji's superiors had arranged for someone to keep an eye on him. That person was Maxwell. Not only did Galji say, we are not on the same side, but Maxwell himself also revealed the feeling that he was not on the same side as Galji. It was no wonder that they would hide their secret operations. Once they appeared in front of the world, they would definitely be guessed through their names, actions, and other aspects. For example, Wu Ming, who had already obtained a lot of information, boldly made a guess. Well, let's put this problem aside for now. Let's talk about the human's final trial first. No matter what, as long as there was a glimmer of possibility, he had to grasp it and explore it in depth. Actually, I was once one of the human's final trial. White Yiksha seemed to recall a long time ago as her eyes showed a trace of absent-mindedness. You? The human's final trial? It was no wonder that Wu Ming was stunned. This was like knowing the true identity of the old man who had been your neighbor for decades with Superman. What? I'm the sun's astral spirit after all. A manifestation of the heavenly oracle. White Yiksha glared at Wu Ming proudly. I got it. Please continue. He extended a hand and politely motioned for White Yiksha to continue. Fortunately, Wu Ming's ability to accept things was very strong. Even if you told Wu Ming that White Yiksha, this lowly, was once a mature sister, he would still accept it. In short, it's fine as long as you know that I'm one of the humans' evil. Chapter 835. I once used the identity of the White Knight Demon King to wreak havoc in the original box court. I used the identity of the human final trial to wreak havoc in the box court. Putting down the teacup in his hand, White Yiksha began to explain seriously. But due to the development of science, humans gradually understood incomprehensible phenomena and existences. For example, humans understood that the heaven-shaking theory was wrong. Correspondingly, White Yiksha's strength was greatly weakened. After my heaven-shaking theory spirit lattice was exploited, I was defeated and finally converted to Buddhism. From this, it could be seen that although humans were weak, humans had a great influence on powerhouses who were restrained by legacies. Then, White Yiksha, will you become an enemy of humans? Wu Ming wasn't concerned about whether White Yiksha would become an enemy, but he was worried that White Yiksha would be suppressed if he became an enemy. The so-called human final trial was for humans to train. This meant that humans would be defeated in the final trial. Oh, are you concerned about me? White Yiksha narrowed his eyes with a sneaky smile. After all, they were friends, so he was naturally worried. However, Wuming didn't want to admit it when he saw White Yiksha's smug face. I'm considering whether to plan ahead on how to kill you, Wuming answered without hesitation. That's a pity. Due to the heaven-shaking theory being unraveled and my conversion to Buddhism, my rights to the human final trial have stopped. But then White Yiksha's tone changed. However, if I return the Godhead and retrieve the spirit lattice, the rights to the human final trial can still be reactivated. Is that so? Wuming nodded. This was one of the reasons why White Yiksha didn't retrieve the spirit lattice to fight the Demon King 3 years ago. However, if it really comes to that, I will have no choice but to return to the upper levels of the box court. Even if White Yiksha didn't want to return, the people in the upper levels of the box court wouldn't let a 2-digit box court powerhouse stay in the lower levels. Although White Yiksha would only think for the people in the lower levels by staying in the lower levels, once this precedent was set, it would be troublesome for other powerhouses to run to the lower levels in the name of being the ruler of the social class. Don't doubt it. Some people like to be a local tyrant. But if you leave, it will be quite troublesome. Wuming looked helpless. If I leave, I will recommend you to be the ruler of the Eastern District. White Yiksha did not hide anything. In fact, when White Yiksha promised Wuming that he would protect the East District and no name, even if he had to return the Godhead, White Yiksha had already made up his mind. I don't want to be the ruler of the hierarchy and cause trouble every day. There's no other way. I can only put in more effort to make you obediently stay at the bottom. Looking at Wuming's appearance, White Yiksha could not help but laugh. Since you've said so, it seems that I can only do as you say. Then the two returned to the main topic. Other than the earth-shattering theory, there are many other theories about the last embryo, such as dystopia, wandering endgame, absolute evil, and so on. But White Yiksha paused. Basically, these demon kings of the last embryo are no longer a threat for the time being, because of the various measures taken by the people of the box court. Therefore, White Yiksha did not think in this direction. You said it yourself that it's only temporary. Galji and the others might want the last embryo to reappear, Wuming asked. For example, human evil. When he saw Absolute Evil's clone, White Yiksha had said that Absolute Evil had been sealed. But the community in charge of guarding Absolute Evil's seal told me that the seal is intact and no suspicious people have been found recently. After experiencing the attack of Absolute Evil's clone, White Yiksha immediately contacted the manager. Moreover, ever since No Name sealed it 200 years ago, the seal has always been perfect and has never been broken. Oh, Absolute Evil was sealed by No Name 200 years ago? Wuming really did not know about this. After all, No Name was once the largest community in the East District. Naturally, it had some glorious results. White Yiksha shook his head matter-of-factly. Looking at White Yiksha's smug expression, those who did not know would think that White Yiksha was the one who sealed Absolute Evil. If that's the case, the place where Absolute Evil was sealed is probably related to No Name. Now it was still managing the seal of Absolute Evil. It was probably an ally of No Name 200 years ago. That's right. The community managing the seal of Absolute Evil is an ally of No Name. White Yiksha said slowly, then looked into Wuming's eyes. The current 5-digit community in the North District, Salamandra. Wuming was deep in thought. Long ago, Wuming had guessed that Galji and the others had attacked the outer gate of the 54545 for some reason. The reason why he only suspected this was simple. The East, South, West, and North districts had all been attacked by Absolute Evil's avatars. The West district was not attacked a second time. The South and East district were attacked a second time in the same place. Only the North district was attacked a second time in a different location. Wuming originally had some guesses about this. With a series of clues and the fact that White Yiksha said that the place where Absolute Evil was sealed was the headquarters of Salamandra. Perhaps Galji and the others really did something in the outer gate of the 54545. However, the conditions for unsealing the seal of Absolute Evil are very special. White Yiksha's next words attracted Wu Ming's attention. Very special? Then White Yiksha extended a finger. First, you must have sun sovereignty. Sun sovereignty. Wu Ming's expression changed slightly. It was unknown if he thought of something bad. What's wrong? White Yiksha noticed the change in Wu Ming's expression and asked kindly. Nothing. Speaking of which, sun sovereignty should be very difficult to collect, right? Wu Ming shook his head and continued the current topic. No matter where the sun was or which world it was in, it was a crucial deciding factor. There were tens of thousands of god groups in the box court world, and each god group had an existence related to the sun. Therefore, in order to take care of the many powerhouses related to the sun, sun sovereignty was divided into 24 portions. However, if I remember correctly, you should have more than half of the sun sovereignty, White Yiksha. It was said that White Yiksha had 14 sun sovereignty. In that case, there were only 10 suns scattered outside. However, 10 sun sovereignty was not enough for hundreds or thousands of god groups. However, although that was the case, if it was someone from the upper echelons of the box court behind Galji, it was reasonable to have 1 or 2 sun sovereignty. However, White Yiksha's next words shocked Wu Ming again. Not only do I have multiple sun sovereignty, but my enemy also has multiple sun sovereignty, and there are 6 of them. In that case, wouldn't there be only 4 sun sovereigns left outside? In that case, sun sovereignty was even rarer. It was no wonder that it was a condition for unsealing. Even so, having sun sovereignty was still one of the conditions. The second condition for unsealing is the Star Sea Dragon King's horn. Wu Ming knew about this. The Star Sea Dragon King was Shadora's ancestor. It was said that the horn on Shadora's head was transplanted from the Star Sea Dragon King, and it was a horn with great power. However, the Star Sea Dragon King's horn is currently on Shadora's head in perfect condition, Wu Ming said. He had just met Shadora. Shadora's horn was still bright and beautiful, and there was no damage at all. It was impossible that someone had secretly replaced Shadora's entire horn. No matter how weak Shadora and Salamandra were, it was impossible for them to be that weak. Are there any other conditions? Wu Ming was more or less relieved. There is a third condition, which is the last one. White Yiksha's expression became serious. Seal the flag of the community of absolute evil. Chapter 836. Hearing this, Wu Ming could not help but narrow his eyes. The flag of the community that seals absolute evil. Wasn't that the flag of no name? That's right, it's the flag of no name, White Yiksha said with certainty. So my guess was right. Wu Ming said subconsciously. What did you guess right? White Yiksha looked at Wu Ming in confusion. This had nothing to do with what she said, right? I always feel like you've been hiding something from me. Facing White Yiksha's suspicious gaze, Wu Ming could not help but laugh. How could that be? Cough cough. Let's call it a day. At this moment, Wu Ming seemed to be in a relaxed state. Wu Ming's sudden relaxed state made White Yiksha begin to complain. Don't be too relaxed. Although the Sun Sovereign is rare, if there's someone behind the other party, it's not impossible to get it. The Star Sea Dragon King's horn is even more so. As for the flag of no name, don't forget that 3 years ago, no name was taken away by the Devil King. Combined with the information you provided, it's most likely those people. To put it simply, White Yiksha was quite worried about whether the other party would break the seal of absolute evil. Don't worry, the enemy can't do anything anymore. Standing up, Wu Ming stretched his body. But White Yiksha still wanted to refute, but Wu Ming immediately interrupted him. All right, I've prepared a surprise for Run and the others. I have to go back and prepare in advance. With a wave of his hand, black and purple ripples appeared beside Wu Ming. Do as you please. White Yiksha took a sip of tea in a fit of pique. Don't worry, White Yiksha. Wait until tomorrow, you'll know why I'm not worried that the seal of absolute evil will be broken. At that time, please take care of No Name. With another wave of his hand, Wu Ming plunged into the portal. The portal closed immediately. I'll know tomorrow. Take care of No Name? What do you mean? Bai Yiksha, who didn't like to keep people in suspense, complained unhappily. Then he took out his gift card and prepared to take out some snacks to eat with the tea. However, like unpredictable fate, White Wuxia seemed to realize something as his eyes suddenly widened. Could it be? Looking at his reflection in the teacup, Bayasha smiled. So that's what you mean. There really is such a guy. He took out the desserts from the gift card and put away the gift card. White Wuxia held a teacup in one hand and a dessert in the other. Well, if that's true, then it's a happy ending. Then White Wuxia took a bite of the snack. At the entrance of No Name's headquarters, a dark purple ripple appeared, and Wuming jumped out. Wuming had not walked through the main entrance for a long time, so he decided to walk through the main entrance. Have we arrived? Looking at the two huge magic puppets guarding the door in front of him, Wuming walked in without hesitation. They were not summoned by summoning tools like the magic puppets in the manor. These two huge magic puppets were high-level magic puppets that Wuming summoned from the inherent enchantment, Nazalik's underground tomb. If it was someone without authorization, the two gigantic magic puppets at the door would stop the person from entering. If they tried to force their way in, they would be attacked by the huge magic puppets. Of course, the magic puppets could only stop low-level tiger men like Jard. If someone like Maxwell tried to force his way in, these two magic puppets could only act as an alarm at best. In the end, they would have to rely on other people in the community. However, with these two magic puppets guarding the door, it felt quite cool. In short, it was better than nothing. Walking into the courtyard of No Name, Wuming saw a bright and beautiful scene. Different from the dilapidated scene he saw when he first walked through the main entrance, the scene Wuming saw now was completely different. The barren land became full of vitality. The originally dry river was filled with clear water, the seemingly broken house was renewed, and the courtyard that did not have any greenery was now full of vitality. Not bad. Wuming was quite satisfied with this. Although Wuming did not often wander around No Name, he was still a member of No Name. Wuming was happy to see No Name become better. Wuming was happy to see No Name become better. Moreover, when he thought about the things he successfully traded with Galji, Wuming's mood became even better. By the way, although I wanted to take Vera around before, it seems like I haven't been to No Name much myself, Wuming said as he walked around No Name. However, as Wuming walked around, he noticed that there was a problem not far away. Wuming quickly walked over and saw Pest and Vera confronting each other, while Lily stood at the side, not knowing what to do. Moreover, if Wuming was not mistaken, there was a hammer on the ground beside Pest. What happened? Wuming could not help but ask. Sir Villo. Lily's voice was full of surprise, as if Wuming's arrival had completely resolved the situation between the two. However, that was more or less correct. When Vera saw Wuming, her short little legs fluttered as she ran to Wuming's side and pulled on his sleeve. When Pest saw Wuming, his face paled even more. It seemed like he was still a little afraid of Wuming, but not as serious as before. What's going on? Wuming did not look at anyone but Lily. After all, the onlooker had a clearer view. I was bringing Vera around when we suddenly bumped into Miss Pest. Then Vera attacked Miss Pest with a hammer, and then... Lily did not continue, but Wuming understood. After that, Pest probably sensed Vera's danger, and did not attack her directly. Instead, they stared at each other and started a confrontation. From the looks of it, Wuming could more or less guess what had happened. Pest, are you hurt? As the victim, Pest naturally needed to be concerned. How could I be hurt by a mere hammer? I was just a little annoyed that I was suddenly attacked, and it was my head. Although Pest was touched by Wuming's kindness, he was still very afraid of Wuming, and his voice was filled with weakness. Since you're not hurt, you can leave first. Wuming knew that Pest was not hurt, so he did not question his words. I know, Pest said in an aggrieved tone. Then he left without stopping, as if he didn't want to stay any longer. Lily, you should leave too. Please take care of Vera for me. How could it be troublesome if I can help Sir Villo? Lily smiled in response to Wuming. It's almost lunchtime, so I'll leave first. See you later, Sir Villo. Vera. With that, Lily left too. In the end, only Wuming and Vera were left. Alright Vera, Why did I attack pests with a hammer? Wuming squatted down and looked at Vera. Because I was interested. It was a very short answer, but it left Wuming speechless. Was it only because you were interested in pest? Vera even showed a surprised expression when she heard Wuming's question. It was as if she was saying, if it wasn't because I was interested, then what else could it be? All right. Wuming sighed helplessly. As expected, there was no lack of problem children in this world. Just then, Lily suddenly ran back. Sir Villo. Everyone is back. Wuming's eyes lit up. Finally back. Chapter 837. No name. As usual, chat room come meeting room. Although there was a realm gate, and it wasn't a long journey, after leaving home for a long time, the first thing to do after returning was to rest. You're finally back. Jiufei Niao sat on the sofa and elegantly took a sip of the black tea she had just prepared. Fei Niao is indeed a young lady. Haruai Hayashi, who was sitting next to Jiufei Niao and stroking the three-furred cat, couldn't help but say, "It's just a habit. Do you want to learn etiquette? I can teach you." Jiufei Niao seemed a little excited and looked at Haruai Hayashi, as if she was offering her services. However, Haruai Hayashi shook his head. That's not necessary. She wasn't cut out to be a young lady. She preferred to spend time with her friends naturally. After all, Haruai Hayashi's personality isn't suitable. Run, who was resting on the opposite side, said weakly. After spending some time together, the members of No Name had a certain understanding of Haruai Hayashi, this seemingly innocent but actually two-faced girl. Haruai Hayashi didn't care about Ren's words at all, and even nodded in agreement. I think that as our No Name's mascot, Black Rabbit is very suitable for learning etiquette. Haruai Hayashi said as he looked at Black Rabbit, who was also resting on the sofa. The Black Rabbit, who was resting with its eyes closed, jumped up when it heard someone talking about it. Its ears also twitched. Black Rabbit also has etiquette knowledge, Yao-san. Although Black Rabbit's etiquette knowledge may not be as good as Miss Fei Niao's, he doesn't need to learn it. Black Rabbit had the title of a Hakata aristocrat. In addition, Black Rabbit had been a judge for a long time, so etiquette was necessary for Black Rabbit. You didn't deny the identity of a mascot, Black Rabbit. Haruai Hayashi covered his mouth and snickered. Yes, that's right. You didn't deny the identity of a mascot. Jiufei Niao didn't cover her mouth and snickered, but she also gave Black Rabbit a proud smile. Ren could only smile awkwardly. Teasing Black Rabbit had become a daily routine of No Name. In no way, Black Rabbit is not a mascot. Black Rabbit, who was once again teased by the two of them, blushed. You two problem children, don't always think about teasing Black Rabbit. Just as Black Rabbit was about to get angry, 16 Knights, who was standing by the window, suddenly spoke. It's so noisy. Black Rabbit, everyone just came back. Can't you be quieter? 16th Knight's solemn words entered Black Rabbit's ears, which made Black Rabbit lower its head in shame. I'm sorry. Of course, her face was still completely red, but this time, it was out of guilt. The others didn't say anything either, as if they were affected by 16th Knight's suppressed tone. However, at this moment, 16 Knights suddenly turned around. Speaking of which, didn't that Villo guy come back? Why can't I see him? 16 Knights didn't seem to be suppressing his emotions at all as he looked at everyone excitedly. The Black Rabbit was stunned. Who was the one who said to be quieter? It was as if Black Rabbit was hallucinating when he said that. After being separated for such a long time, I really miss him. No matter what, we should have a good fight. Ha ha ha. 16th Knight laughed, but his laughter sounded like mockery to Black Rabbit's ears. Could it be? Ren suddenly realized that 16th Knight was playing with Black Rabbit again. However, Jiufei Niao and Haruhi Masaaki looked like they had already guessed it. Sure enough, Mr. 16th Knight is the biggest problem child. Black Rabbit was once again driven mad by his antics. Gotcha. At this moment, the sound of the door being pushed open attracted everyone's attention. You're still so energetic, everyone. The voice was heard before the person was seen. Then a familiar face with black hair and red eyes appeared. Mr. Villo. Black Rabbit shouted excitedly. Mr. Villo, long time no see. Ren stood up and politely greeted Wu Ming. Long time no see, Villo. Jiu Fei Niao gracefully greeted. Haruhibe Masayaki, who was not good with words, only nodded at Wu Ming, but the smile on his face was particularly conspicuous. Wu Ming did not reply to them one by one. He just looked at them one by one and spoke to everyone. Everyone, long time no see. Then, Wu Ming had a smile on his face. Yo, little brother, I missed you so much. 16th Knight, who was standing by the window, walked toward Wu Ming, flipped over the sofa with one hand, and jumped in front of Wu Ming. You've been doing well recently, haven't you? Wu Ming smiled helplessly. First, he participated in all kinds of gift competitions in the Southern District, and then he was attacked by Absolute Evil's clone. 16th Knight must have had a good time punching him. Thanks to you, ha ha ha. At the same time, Wu Ming and 16th Knight reached out a fist each and gently touched each other. Then Wu Ming looked at everyone. Although I know you're probably tired, I've prepared a surprise for you. Do you want to take a look? Surprise? Run, Black Rabbit, Jiu Fei Niao, and Haruhibe Masayaki were stunned. Don't keep us in suspense, hurry up and take it out. 16th Knight put one hand on her waist and waved the other hand in the air. Jiu Fei Niao and Haruhibe Masayaki also nodded. Since it was a surprise, he had to take it out directly. That was the understanding of surprise by problem children. However, Wu Ming began to keep them in suspense again. There's no rush when everyone is here. However, when he said that, everyone was basically here. For example, now. Knock knock. The door that Wu Ming had not closed was politely knocked twice. Then Lily's voice came from behind Wu Ming. Villo, Sama, I've brought Letitia-sama and Miss Pester here. Wu Ming smiled slightly. Please take a seat, everyone. In the conference room next door, for the first time in 3 years, there were a lot of people gathered. Near the wall, there was a very dignified rectangular table surrounded by the main members of No Name. Actually, this room was the real conference room. The previous room was just a chat room for the members of No Name to rest in. Sometimes they were too lazy to change places, so it was used as a conference room. At the front was the leader of No Name, Ren Russell. On Ren's left and right sat Wu Ming and 16th Knight. However, this was slightly beyond Ren's tolerance limit. Let's forget about it. Ren's forehead was sweating due to nervousness. You're the leader, Ren. Wu Ming sighed. It's natural for the leader to sit at the top. 16th Knight smiled. Our No Name is going to rise in the future. You have to work hard to master the calmness of a leader. Wu Ming said while knocking on the table. Besides, we're all on the same side. What's there to be nervous about? Just be normal. However, Ren just smiled awkwardly. It's because we're all on the same side that I'm nervous. Everyone believes in you, little guy. 16th Knight held his chin with one hand and pointed at the other, No Name members. Ren looked at 16th Knight, then looked at the other members who were looking at him with encouraging eyes. He took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, I understand. Sitting at the top, Ren straightened his back and looked serious. I hereby announce that the official No Name meeting begins now. Chapter 838. This meeting was suggested by Mr. Villo, so the first speech will be given to Mr. Villo. Ren reached out his hand and pointed at Wu Ming. Wu Ming gave Ren face and nodded. This meeting was suggested by me, mainly because I want to share with everyone the surprise I brought back from the Northern District. Wu Ming said and looked at everyone. At this time, the seat next to 16 Knights, Haruhi Hiroyuki, who was sitting there, raised his hand and said, It shouldn't be an ordinary surprise, right? If it was an ordinary surprise, there would be no need for this kind of meeting. That's right. Wu Ming nodded and didn't say much. Because Wu Ming wanted to use action to prove it. Wu Ming reached out his hand, and the golden dragoness space ripple appeared on the table. The golden ripple moved horizontally, and a rectangular piece of cloth was spat out from the golden ripple, and neatly laid on the table. This is Run, who was sitting at the head of the table, as well as Ryubi and Letitia, who were sitting next to Wu Ming, were all shocked and immediately stood up. A flag. Jiuyuko, who was sitting next to Haruai Hiroyuki, saw the truth of the cloth and was puzzled. It was a red flag with a golden border, and the pattern on the flag was a girl with hills and earth as the background. Miss Hiroyuki, that was our no-names flag. Lily, who was sitting next to Hiroyuki, said with a trembling voice. At the same time, a few drops of tears fell from Lily's cheeks. The reason why Lily didn't stand up emotionally was because Lily was crying so emotionally that she didn't have the strength to stand up. Our flag. Run, who stood up, reached out his hand and wanted to touch the flag that belonged to No Name. But because Run was sitting at the head of the table and the position of the flag wasn't close to Ren couldn't touch it at all. On the contrary, Ryubi and Letitia, who were sitting next to him, easily touched the flag. That's right, it is indeed our flag, Letitia said with absolute certainty. Mr. Villo, how did you find our flag? Black Rabbit looked at Wu Ming with tears in her eyes. The emotional Black Rabbit also shed tears, and its voice began to tremble slightly. Just like Lily, it was the excitement and joy of the return of the No Name flag. I got it from the Demon King who attacked No Name 3 years ago. Following that, Wu Ming told everyone about what had happened between him and Galji. Wu Ming did not tell the members of No Name everything that had happened in the past. After all, it was too complicated. Therefore, Wu Ming only told them the important things. After he finished speaking, Wu Ming didn't do anything else. He just waiting for the members of No Name to digest the information he had brought. To put it simply, because you captured their important subordinates, you have forced them to complete this trade, right? 16 knights easily understood the information that Wu Ming had brought. But Mr. Villo, why didn't you capture all of them? Maybe you could have investigated the Demon King who attacked our community 3 years ago. Black Rabbit asked Wu Ming rather excitedly. Calm down, you perverted rabbit, 16 knights said rather rudely. Didn't you hear what Villo said? They have some power behind them, and they might even be from the upper echelons of the box court. 16 knights' eyes were full of ridicule. Of course, 16 knights was not ridiculing Black Rabbit, but the box court. The upper echelons of the box court created the box court, and then used others to cause trouble in the box court, causing a disaster to the box court. It was as if the partners of justice were actually the villains of the boss. How ironic. Jiufei Niao also opened his mouth to explain to Black Rabbit. If we capture all of them, the people behind them will send new puppets to the lower echelons of the box court. If that was the case, it would be better to let Galji and his people, who he knew pretty well, cast a long line to catch a big fish. Haruai Hiroyuki also spoke. Also, didn't Villo say that Galji has the tendency to betray the people behind him? Although Haruai Hiroyuki had no intention of befriending Galji, the saying the enemy of my enemy is my friend still made some sense. What Jiufei Niao and Haruai Hiroyuki said was actually the problem that Wu Ming had considered at the time. Therefore, Wu Ming did not choose to cooperate with Galji, nor did he choose to completely fall out with him. In the end, Wu Ming chose to make a trade with Galji. They did not form an alliance, nor did they form an enemy. It was just a simple trade, although Wu Ming was a bit rough. Galji and his people are not a threat. The key is that 4-digit Demon King called Maxwell. After Wu Ming said that, the others also had a serious expression. He has an immortal body, so it seems that my fists are useless. 16 knights shrugged and said in a relaxed tone. I'm afraid my ability won't be of any use either. Jiufei Niao shook her head. Haruai Hiroyuki looked at his hand, then looked at Wu Ming. Villo, you can't do anything to him either? I can't do anything with normal methods, but I haven't tried any other special methods. Then, Wu Ming looked at his palm and slowly clenched it into a fist. The next time I see him, I'll try to use a sealing technique to deal with him. If you can't beat him to death, then don't beat him to death. It was such a simple principle. But according to what you said, he won't easily appear in front of you, right? Jiufei Niao asked. Maxwell was scared by Wu Ming's blade of salvation, so he abandoned Galji and the others and ran away. Not to mention that it would be difficult to see him again. Maxwell would probably run away immediately after seeing him. I naturally have a way to make that guy walk into a trap. Wu Ming smiled and kept them in suspense. Keeping us in suspense again. Jiu Fei Niao snorted in disdain at Wu Ming's suspense and turned her head to the side. It's like wine, the more it is brewed, the more fragrant it gets. Wu Ming finished and looked at Ren, who was in deep thought. Ren, do you have anything to say? However, Ren sighed slightly. I'm a bit concerned about Galji. According to what you said, he is about the same age as me. But he was used as a prop less than 3 years old. The point was that Galji and Ren were the leaders of their respective communities. Plus, he was born less than 3 years ago as a prop, so the pain he suffered must not be any less than Ren. You can't sympathize with him, Ren. You know, because of Galji's plan, many people's families were destroyed and they died an unnatural death. Wu Ming's face was serious. If he was not worried about the power behind Galji, even if Wu Ming did not execute Galji and the others on the spot, he would have captured them and handed them over to White Wuxia. After all, a pitiful person must have something to hate. For freedom was not an excuse to hurt others. I'm sorry. Ren lowered his head guiltily. But 16th Knights refuted Ren. This is not something you need to apologize for, leader. Little thing. Kindness would sometimes bring about mistakes, but the starting point of kindness was never wrong. Also, leader, don't always show such a lack of confidence. You need to be more confident. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Listening to advice was a good thing, but don't always put your status so low. After all, Ren was the leader of No Name. Yes. I'm very sorry. Ren was at a loss. By the way, Mr. Varen, did you manage to get anything else from No Name from Galji? Black Rabbit quickly tried to smooth things over for Ren. Of course, even if I intend to let them go, I still have to skin them alive. Chapter 839. In the next second, Wu Ming took out a card out of thin air. It was Wu Ming's gift card. When Wu Ming and 16 knights first arrived at the box court, the 4 of them went to White Wuxia to appraise the gift according to Black Rabbit's suggestion. At that time, White Wuxia gave each of them a gift card that could be used to store items. However, Wu Ming had the dragon nest space, so he didn't use it often. But if it's this, I'm afraid my dragon nest space isn't suitable for storing it. As Wu Ming spoke, the gift card in his hand flashed. That was the sign that the item stored in the gift card was taken out. A dragon-like object and a ball of light filled with the aura of the sun appeared in front of everyone. This is a divinity and the sun? Pest, who had been sitting beside Letitia, was shocked and couldn't help but shout. Pest had been bestowed with the prestige divinity, so she was naturally familiar with it. As the incarnation of the Black Death who was closely related to the sun, Pest was also familiar with the power of the sun. Furthermore, Pest looked at the divine spark and the sun's sovereignty with a thirsty gaze. If she could obtain the rights to these 2 blessings in this loot-sharing convention, she believed, her strength would definitely undergo a qualitative change. Now, because of Wu Ming, she had reached 4 digits. If she added the divinity and sovereignty of the sun, even if she couldn't reach 3 digits, she would reach the peak of 4 digits. However, Pest could only think about it because the aura of this divinity seems like. 16 knights couldn't help but look at the silent Letitia. Mr. Villo, could this be? Black Rabbit had more or less guessed it. That's right. This is Letitia's divinity and sovereignty of the sun of Ophiuchus constellation, Wu Ming said with certainty. Pest, who heard Wu Ming's words, had a look of regret. Since it was a gift from Letitia in the past, then it definitely had nothing to do with her. Letitia's divinity? Ju Yuan Flying Bird was stunned. Sovereignty of the sun of Ophiuchus constellation? Haruai Hiroyuki stopped stroking his cat. As expected, these are all gifts from Senior Letitia. The Black Rabbit was overjoyed. As if reflecting Black Rabbit's words, the divinity and sun's sovereignty slowly floated in front of Letitia. I didn't expect Galji to have Letitia's gift. Ren was quite excited. He was happy from the bottom of his heart that Letitia's things could come back. Divinity and sun's sovereignty were not small items. One could transform a creature's body into the highest grade of a species, while the other was even rarer. There were only 25 sun's sovereignty in total, not to mention that this sun's sovereignty in Ophiuchus constellation was created for Letitia. More importantly, if the things that originally belonged to Letitia returned to her, Letitia's strength would definitely improve further. In this way, not only was No Name one step closer to its former peak, but Letitia had also completely recovered. Like a broken jigsaw puzzle, No Name would be pieced back together bit by bit. And Ren believed that with Wu Ming and 16 knights around, this jigsaw puzzle would be even more beautiful than before when the time came. In response to Ren's question, Wu Ming naturally nodded his head. Regarding this question, I will explain it later. Then, Wu Ming looked at Letitia. Okay, Letitia, quickly put away the divinity and sun's sovereignty. But Letitia hesitated. Master. Letitia looked at Wu Ming with guilt and gratitude. Her face was full of hesitation. Wu Ming, who already had a tacit understanding with Letitia, understood Letitia's eyes. Letitia was not willing to accept the gift that originally belonged to her. As for the reason, perhaps it was guilt and self-blame for giving up her own power, or perhaps it was because she wanted to let others use it, or perhaps it was because she was satisfied with the power that Wu Ming gave her. All of these could be the reason why Letitia was not willing to accept it. But no matter what, these were Letitia's things. Even if Letitia was Wu Ming's, even if Letitia took the initiative to give up these gifts, even if these gifts were separated from Letitia for a long time, no matter what, these were Letitia's things. This divinity was originally yours. It's just returning it to its original owner. As for the sun's sovereignty, among all of us here, Ophiuchus constellation is the most compatible with you. If you don't want it, then this sun's sovereignty is useless. After all, the sun's sovereignty of Ophiuchus constellation was originally an additional sun's sovereignty that the box court system created for Letitia. Don't be blinded by power, but don't take the initiative to give up the power that you deserve. Only with power can you protect the people you want to protect. The others didn't say anything, they just quietly watched this scene. If you still feel guilty, then take this power and protect No Name, well, protect the box court well. This is the atonement for your previous incarnation of the Demon King to wreak havoc on the box court. It's also the mission that I, as your master, have given you, Letitia. At that moment, without waiting for Letitia's reaction, Wu Ming forcefully stuffed Letitia's divinity and the sun's sovereignty of Ophiuchus constellation into Letitia's body. Letitia sighed and smiled helplessly. Master, I understand. I promise you, this body will always be loyal to you. I will definitely carry out your will to the end. At that moment, Letitia's aura also suddenly changed. An invisible pressure spread out in all directions. Everyone present noticed Letitia's change. Even Lily was no exception. Now, with all of her previous power restored, plus the power that Wu Ming gave before, it could be said that Letitia was now at the top of the 4 digits. Now, even White Yiksha, who didn't return the divinity and spirit core, couldn't do anything to Letitia. Woo-woo. Pest let out a few unwilling whimpers. Damn it, I'm so envious. That's great, Senior Letitia. Lily's little tail wagged. If there was anyone who was the happiest, it would definitely be Lily. As someone who didn't have much battle power, and wasn't part of the main force, but was able to sit together and discuss with everyone, Lily was naturally very happy to see her comrade's power rise to another level. If she didn't have any power, she would pray for her comrade to become stronger. If she couldn't protect her comrade, she would pray for her comrade to become stronger to protect the other comrade. As for herself, who didn't have much battle power, she just had to do what she was supposed to do, for example, do the logistics work that her comrade gave her. Thank you, Lily. Letitia returned Lily's bright smile. The surprise that Mr. Villo brought really scared me. Oz, we have to hang up our flag this way. Our No Name will once again have a community with a flag. Black Rabbit excitedly held up the flag, ready to do as he said. Then, Wu Ming raised his hand to signal Black Rabbit to not be anxious. Don't be anxious, Black Rabbit, I also got something from Galji. However, this frightened everyone. Hey you, did you really skin the other party? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.